the 10th level of the Grand Deduction Tower. It was completely different from the other levels, and it was like an empty room. When Xianxia arrived here, he saw numerous ancient paintings first, and every single one of them were different and hung on the surrounding walls. Xianxia was stunned as he never expected that this place was actually so ordinary, and it was like the residence of a great painter. Besides those numerous paintings, he actually didn't notice any other decorations. He walked forward to arrive before the first painting, and then he raised his eyes to look at it. The painting was of a vast starry sky with a tall and handsome old man holding a jade tower while standing upright beneath the starry sky. Besides that, there was a middle-aged man in violet robes with a large girdle, a youth in clothes and a hat whiter than snow, a capable and mighty old man, and a beautiful woman in a fiery red dress standing respectfully around the old man holding the jade tower. The figures of these four people were extremely mighty and coiled with the energy of the laws, and they seemed like overlords that ruled a world. But before that handsome old man, they seemed like juniors and were respectful and reverent, while their eyes revealed expressions of love and esteem. Moreover, at the instant she saw the appearance of the old man for the first time, he seemed as if he was struck by lightning, and he felt slightly dazed. Why is it, Senior Fuxi? I'm absolutely not wrong. The Fuxi divine statue was still standing within his sea of consciousness, and when he compared the two of them, they seemed as if they came from the same mold. They were both so ancient, handsome, mighty, and great. In his heart, Xianxia had even taken Fuxi to be his master since a long time ago now. He'd seen a painting related to Fuxi on the 10th level of the Grand Deduction Tower, so how could he not be shocked? Could it be that the talisman dimension is related to Senior Fuxi? Xianxia glanced inadvertently and looked at the jade tower that Fuxi held in his hand within the painting, and then his eyes focused abruptly. Shockingly, it was the Grand Deduction Tower. Xianxia took a deep breath and continued looking at the paintings. When his gaze swept past those four other people in the painting, a thought instantly arose in his mind. They wouldn't be the Eastern Emperor Taizhen, the Dark Emperor Yuansun, the Phoenix Queen Yinggu, and the demon forefather Luoshang, right? Instantly, a scene appeared in Xianxia's mind. During the period when the talisman dimension was created, Fuxi led these four great figures to the front line of the battlefield of the three dimensions and witnessed the army of cosmos beasts running wild and harming the innocent. So he aroused the intention to create the talisman dimension to resist the cosmos beasts. If it's really like this, then doesn't this mean the creation of this talisman dimension is deeply related to my sect? Xianxia pondered deeply for a moment before he turned and walked to the second painting. When he saw the scene on the second painting, he instantly confirmed his thoughts from before. On the painting, the violet-robed middle-aged man held the Heaven Discernment Ruler, while the other three respectively held the Earth God Seal, World Suppression Tower, and Tao Severance Sword. They glowed as they stood amidst the river of stars in the universe, and they seemed like gods that split apart the chaos. Moreover, the initial form of a world was developing at the center of the four of them, and based on its outline, it was exactly the talisman dimension. It really is like that. Xianxia was shocked in his heart because he finally understood why everyone in the world knew of the four great figures and the four chaotic divine artifacts, yet there was rarely anyone that knew the origins of the Grand Deduction Tower. It was because this tower came from Senior Fuxi. He continued looking at the following painting. The scene had changed in the third painting, or perhaps it could be said that it was a portrait. Within the portrait was a young man with a refined bearing who wore ancient clothes and a tall crown. He had a smile on the corners of his mouth, and his eyes were profound like the stars. When Xianxia met the gaze of this young man, he actually had the strange feeling as if his soul had been seen through. This was just a painting that had been preserved for countless years, yet it actually possessed such a lifelike aura, causing Xianxia to be unable to help but feel a wisp of terror. The following paintings were just like the third, and all of them revealed the lifelike portrait of a figure, and it seemed as if they would come back to life in the next moment. Surprisingly, Xianxia saw the portrait of his third senior brother amongst them. All those years ago, while he was at an isle at the center of a lake within the southern barbaric mountain range that neighbored Pine Mist City in the Darchu dynasty, his third senior brother had once arrived there with the intention of taking Jiyu back. Later on, Jiyu refused, and his third senior brother could only leave helplessly. Before his third senior brother left, he'd given Xianxia the bone of a rock, allowing Xianxia to cultivate the supreme divine ability stellar lightning form that was recorded within the bone. So how could Xianxia not remember him? Could it be that the figure within these scenes are all disciples of Senior Jiyu? Moreover, they took the Grand Deduction Tower as a testing ground? Xianxia was stunned, and then he shook his head. No, many members of the four great clans had once ascended the Grand Deduction Tower in the history of the Talisman Dimension. Obviously, it's impossible for all of them to be disciples of Senior Jiyu. He faintly felt that perhaps the existence of the Grand Deduction Tower was for the sake of testing the disciples Senior Fuxi had taken, and at the same time it didn't refuse the entrance of others to undergo training within it. The reason this was done was none other than for the sake of maintaining the safety of the Talisman Dimension. After all, the Grand Deduction Tower had become the heart of the entire Talisman Dimension now, so more people coming here and repairing the talisman diagrams was absolutely beneficial to the Talisman Dimension. Moreover, during this entire process, they were even able to obtain benefits like a great amount of virtue energy, the ability to exchange virtue energy for the precious treasures in the myriad balls, and so on and so forth. In next to no time, Xianxia stopped before the final painting. Sure enough, he noticed that the painting actually portrayed his senior sister Liang, and she was still dressed as a man with picturesque features and revealed lingering charm and talent. 3,000 years ago, senior sister Liang ascended the tower. 3,000 years later, I, Xianxia, have arrived here as well. The matters of this world are really marvelous beyond words. Xianxia sighed with emotion for a short moment before he raised his eyes to look at the other parts of the 10th level. Yet he didn't discover anything, let alone the mysterious cultivation technique. There was only an empty painting scroll beside the last painting. The painting scroll was completely empty and clean without the slightest spot on it. But when Xianxia's divine sense entered it, the entire 10th level of the Grand Deduction Tower instantly underwent a change. Flowers fluttered down from the sky while golden lotuses sprouted up from the group, and strands of golden divine radiance suffused the area and caused the entire space to be dazzling and resplendent. Moreover, the air faintly carried the tune of the Grand Tao drifting through it while the sounds of the gods speaking praise could be heard faintly. In merely an instant, Xianxia actually had the dazed feeling that he was in an immortal paradise. This scene wasn't an illusion but real, and he was even able to see virtue gold light enshrouding the surroundings. Before Xianxia could react, a strand of strange fluctuation arose abruptly before the flowers, golden lotuses, divine radiance, tune of the Tao, and everything else in the entire space transformed into rows of ancient and mysterious symbols. In the next moment, Xianxia felt his soul shake as these ancient and mysterious symbols gurgled into his sea of consciousness like a fountain. This technique studies the workings of the heavens. These workings cover a myriad of principles, and these principles are my Tao. My Tao is dedicated to my heart, and my heart is free. I viewed and comprehended the profundities of the world and attained virtue energy that transformed calamity into development of the world. An ancient and distant voice resounded out within his sea of consciousness. It was like the sound of the morning bell, the chanting of the Grand Tao, and it caused Xianxia's soul to have the miraculous feeling of bathing within the profundities of the Grand Tao. He finally understood where this cultivation technique came from, and he finally understood why his senior sister Liang would say the method to deal with the problem of his advancement into the earthly immortal realm would be in the Talisman Dimension. All of this was because of this cultivation technique, immeasurable virtue. It didn't cultivate true essence or shaman energy, nor the soul, and it cultivated the mysterious energy that came from the Tao heart. This cultivation technique utilized virtue energy as its source of energy, and its goal was to temper and improve the mysterious energy that came from the Tao heart. This energy was very special, and it was too illusory and ethereal to the myriad of cultivators in the world. It seemed that the utter lack of cultivation methods for it caused it to be impossible for them to grasp it. Cultivators only knew that the most direct and simplest method to improve the mysterious energy that came from the Tao heart was to annihilate great sinners. Even if it was Xianxia, he was merely aware that this energy was capable of allowing cultivators to endure a state of combat for a longer period of time, and he wouldn't experience the feeling of exhaustion from consuming too much of his mental and physical strength like he had in the past. Simply speaking, if true essence and shaman energy were taken to be the source of energy for combat, then under the circumstances that two parties were on par, the final outcome would be determined by the heart energy. A battle of endurance hinged upon consumption, and when one consumed one's physical and mental strength for an extended period of time, it would be a competition of the tenacity of one's heart energy. But at this moment, after he obtained this secret technique, immeasurable virtue, Xianxia instantly understood that there were indeed methods to cultivate heart energy. According to the introduction within the cultivation technique, the realms of heart energy were divided into heart chi, heart core, heart soul, and heart infant. In the mortal dimension, the limit that all cultivators were able to attain was the heart core realm. Moreover, only a small portion of people were capable of attaining this state. After all, no matter if it was slaughtering great sinners or repressing evil and encouraging good, it was absolutely not something an ordinary person was capable of achieving. Similarly, even though it was slightly easier to gain virtue energy in the talisman dimension, it was absolutely not something that could be obtained so easily as Xianxia had. Xianxia had overcome all obstacles from the village and charged all the way into the imperial city before ascending the 10th level of the Grand Deduction Tower. During this process, most people had either died under the iron hooves of cosmos beasts or were vexed while trying to repair a damaged talisman diagram in the Talisman Diagram Grand Hall. Even if he'd attained such outstanding accomplishments, the virtue energy Xianxia had accumulated until now had barely allowed him to attain the heart core realm. On the other hand, only figures in the immortal dimension and netherworld were capable of attaining the heart-soul realm, whereas it was almost impossible to find a single person at this realm in the mortal dimension. So it turns out that so long as I cultivate my heart energy to the heart-soul realm, I'll be able to hide the aura of a variant that I possess, and I'll be able to deceive the detention of the heaven Tao, allowing me to smoothly greet my tribulation to advance into the earthly immortal realm. Moreover, I wouldn't have to suffer the annihilation of the divine lightning of judgment. Xianxia took a deep breath while his eyes were bright like stars. Xianxia didn't hesitate any longer, and he turned around and left the 10th level at the next moment. It wasn't the time to cultivate the immeasurable virtue technique now because Liang Bing and Tinglan were waiting for him, and he was too pressed for time. The longer he delayed, the more disadvantageous it would be for the two of them, and it might even put their lives in danger. Swoosh! Xianxia's figure flashed, and he vanished. He was completely unaware that a figure suddenly appeared on the empty painting scroll on the wall of the 10th level. The figure wore azure clothes, seemed upright, had a ramrod straight figure, and an extraordinary bearing. Shockingly, it was Xianxia. Perhaps, if someone was able to ascend to this place 3,000 years from now, only then would someone be able to lay eyes on that painting. When Xianxia returned to the 9th level of the Grand Deduction Tower, he noticed Gu Lushui and the others laying all over the ground, and all of them had swollen lumps at the back of their heads, causing it to be extremely amusing. A wisp of a strange expression appeared on the corners of Xianxia's mouth. Could it be that all of this was done by the tiny cauldron? When he thought up to here, his gaze swept towards the surroundings as he said, "Senior." No one replied. Xianxia was stunned. Could it be that the tiny cauldron has left? Kill the people on the ground and leave. Right at this moment, a voice sounded out from the surrounding space, and it was precisely the voice of the tiny cauldron. Xianxia instantly heaved a sigh of relief. Truthfully speaking, he was really unwilling to see the tiny cauldron leave after being with it for such a long period of time. In his heart, even though the tiny cauldron had become long-winded and like the nag now, its status in his heart hadn't changed. Without the slightest hesitation, the talisman armament in his hand swung about repeatedly as he slit the throat of Gu Lushui and the others, and he acted resolutely and without showing the slightest mercy. Since the moment they ascended the Grand Deduction Tower, they had become mortal enemies, and Xianxia firmly believed that if it was him lying there on the ground, he would absolutely die without a doubt. As for the young masters and young miss from the immortal dimension, Nan Xiuchong, Wan Renyi, Chao He, and Chu Xiao, even though they had extraordinary backgrounds, they deserved to die for offending Xianxia. Let's go. After he did all of this, She put the talisman armament away and intended to leave the 9th level. Never mind. My strength hasn't recovered yet, so I'll let them off this time. The tiny cauldron's voice sounded out while it still didn't show itself. Senior, what do you mean by this? Could it be that they aren't dead? She was stunned, and then he lowered his head to look at the numerous corpses on the ground. The vitality in these bodies had dried up, and it was utterly impossible for them to come back from life. Those are little fellows from the immortal dimension, and they have a strand of soul stored within the immortal dimension. So unless you slaughter your way into their sex and annihilate their souls, otherwise they will still survive. The tiny cauldron spoke calmly. What? She was shocked because it was the first time he'd heard this. If it's really like this, then people from the immortal dimension only have to store a strand of their soul in their sex, and wouldn't they be impossible to kill? Only great sects are capable of this. Moreover, after they're reborn from the strand of their soul, they can only start cultivating from the beginning, so it has its own advantages and disadvantages. Then Tiny Cauldron explained. She came to an understanding, and then he seemed to have thought of something and asked, Senior, then what about the Earth God's seal in Gu Liushui's possession? I ate it. The Tiny Cauldron's reply was extremely direct. She was stunned, and he was extremely helpless because what else could he do since it was already eaten? But right after that, he suddenly realized that the Tiny Cauldron's voice seemed to have returned back to normal, and it was flat, indifferent, and without the slightest emotion. Could it be that the Tiny Cauldron's defect has been healed? She deduced that it was probably related to the Tiny Cauldron's consumption of those peerless divine treasures because even the Earth God's seal had been munched down by it. So if it was still long-winded and nagged like a bitter woman, it really couldn't be justified. Let's go. Right at this moment, a wisp of fluctuation arose in space as the Tiny Cauldron appeared, and it flashed before vanished into Xianxia's clothes. All right. She nodded before his figure flashed, and he'd already charged into the expanse of void before him. Earlier, Xianxia had witnessed the process of the river diagram fragments utilizing his body to repair the entire Grand Deduction Tower, so he'd obtained a clear understanding of the talisman diagrams and restrictions in the tower. Thus, he naturally didn't have to worry about having no path to return to the 8th level. It was even to the extent that if he were to ascend the tower from the 1st level once again, then he would absolutely have no need to rely on any external sources of strength to easily arrive at the 10th level. Fortunately, this kid didn't notice that I've become fat. Otherwise, it would be too embarrassing. The Tiny Cauldron's chubby body that was like a water balloon shrunk back within the clothes on Xianxia's chest, and it hid itself even deeper than before. At the 8th level of the Grand Deduction Tower, Luo Zixuan was like an ant on a hot pan as he walked up and down without end, and the space between his brows was filled with anxiousness and rage. I wonder which step of the 9th level stairway has that little bastard ascended to. The battle between mysterious immortal realm expert beneath the stairway had gone on for an entire 2 hours now. Up until this point in the battle, Liang Bing and Teng Lan were already covered in blood, while the space between their brows were filled with exhaustion. No matter how strong the conviction in their hearts was, under the circumstances that there was a wide gap in combat strength between the two sides, a declining state couldn't be avoided. It was even to the extent that it was slightly shocking to Luo Zhanbei and the others that Teng Lan and Liang Bing were able to persist until now. But the more it was like this, the greater the killing intent in the hearts of Luo Zhanbei and the others was because once such an opponent were to escape, it would lead to boundless future troubles. So not only did they not ease up, their attacks became even swifter and fiercer. The scene before his eyes was that of Teng Lan and Liang Bing being like two leaves that were floating on the ocean, and they were struck repeatedly by the violent waves. Yet even though they seemed to be on the verge of sinking, they still struggled tenaciously and were unable to accept their fate. Luo Zixuan became even more restless as he watched this scene, causing his face to warp while he muttered madly, "Those pieces of trash. They weren't even able to kill a little bastard. If he's really able to ascend the 10th level." When he thought up to here, Luo Zixuan's entire body froze, and he was unable to move any longer. However, his expression gradually returned to calm. Even if that little bastard really obtains that cultivation technique, there still seems to be room to turn the situation around. We just have to wait here and kill him on his way down before plundering that cultivation technique from his possession. Luo Zixuan took a deep breath while the restlessness in his heart was completely wiped away, causing his entire body to be at ease. He even slightly hoped that Gu Lushui and the others died there because in this way, there wouldn't be anyone to share the fruits of his success any longer. Third martial ancestor and seniors, don't kill that little bitch. I want to marry her because if I don't train her to the point of being obedient like a dog, I won't be able to display my ability. Luo Zixuan glanced at Liang Bing while he emitted gloomy and ghastly loud laughter, and his voice carried faint indecency. Ha ha ha! That's very good. Luo Zhanbei roared with laughter. He was countless times more experienced than Luo Zixuan, so he was naturally aware that at this time, the cultivation technique in the 10th level had most probably fallen into the hands of another, so changing their strategy and waiting here to kill the person was the right path to take. The expressions of Gu Jiuzhen and Yin Biyun remained indifferent, and they didn't say anything. In any case, Liang Bing falling into Luo Zixuan's hands was no different than killing her, and it was even more tormenting than death. As for the black-robed man, he didn't speak from the beginning until the end, and his imposing aura was ghastly and ruthless. Luo Zixuan, because of what you said, I'll drag you down with me even if I die. Liang Bing's eyes were icy cold, and her soft voice revealed ruthlessness. Bang! Luo Zhanbei seized the moment she spoke and grasped this opportunity to flash forward before his fists smashed fiercely towards Liang Bing's shoulders like two mountains, and he blasted her flying. Pooh! While still in midair, Liang Bing couldn't refrain from spitting out a mouthful of blood, causing her beautiful face to go pale while the bones in her entire body seemed to be on the verge of displacement. At this point in the battle, she was already exhausted, and after suffering this heavy blow, if it wasn't for her firm will, she would have probably fainted instantaneously. Seize this opportunity to capture her. Kill! When they saw this, Gu Jiuzhen and Yin Biyun made a move at the same time, and they chased up with the intention of capturing Liang Bing in one go. How dare you! Suddenly, Tung Lan roared furiously while his eyes almost split open as 2 lines of tears of blood flowed down, and he actually disregarded his own safety to leap over to before Liang Bing and use his own back to forcefully resist their attacks. Bang! The bones in Tung Lan's entire body shattered inch by inch, causing blood to flow from his 7 apertures, whereas his entire body flew out uncontrollably and smashed fiercely on the wall. His countenance was translucent and white like wax, and even his breathing became difficult. At this moment, not to mention a mysterious immortal, even an ordinary person was capable of taking his life. Uncle Lan! Liang Bing's face that was usually icy cold and overbearing finally changed. She cried out in shock while she flashed over to Tung Lan's side, and she was unable to restrain tears from flowing out in a row from her eyes. Ha ha ha! Third martial ancestor. Quickly capture that little bitch. Luo Zixuan stood on the stone stairway while roaring endlessly with laughter, and he revealed an unrestrained bearing. What's so difficult about that? Luo Zhanbei roared with laughter as well, and he was just about to move forward when his eyes focused before he suddenly looked behind Luo Zixuan. Right at this moment, an unexpected event occurred. Swoosh! A figure suddenly appeared from the void behind the stone stairway, and this figure was like a bolt of lightning that carried a wisp of a cold glow that slashed down at Luo Zixuan. Luo Zixuan was horrified and practically flashed down the stairway instinctively. Pooh! Unfortunately, he was still a step too slow, and his right arm was severed by the sudden sword strike, causing a rain of blood to spray in the air while he emitted an extremely miserable shrill cry as he staggered to the ground. Meanwhile, everyone clearly saw the person that had come. This figure was tall and carried an extraordinary bearing, and it was precisely Chun Shi. Liang Bing stood on guard before Tung Lan with a sorrowful expression, and her entire body shook when she saw Chun Shi appear. But when she recalled her current situation, her eyes instantly dimmed down. At this moment, even if he has obtained the cultivation technique in the 10th level, how can we escape the encirclement of these bastards? Eldest young miss, quickly leave with Chun Shi. I'll help both of you slaughter out a trace of the opportunity to survive. Tung Lan gasped rapidly for breath while he spoke in an extremely anxious manner, and his voice seemed to be squeezed out from the gaps between his teeth and seemed to be so difficult. As he spoke, he wanted to exert all his strength to move his body. But in the end, he fell heavily on the ground while he revealed a dismal expression. The corners of his mouth wriggled for a long time, yet he didn't say another word in the end. His heart was filled with rage and self-blame, and he felt he was too useless at this moment. Uncle Lan, don't move anymore. We'll surely be able to survive. Liang Bing had a pained expression as she hurriedly stopped Tung Lan's actions. On the other side, when he saw the person who severed his arm was actually Chen Shi, Luo Zixuan's expression instantly warped and turned savage as he roared. Third martial ancestor, grab this damnable bastard. You must not allow him to escape. This was simply a waste of breath because Chen Shi was too valuable to Luo Zhanbei, the black-robed man, Gu Juzhen, and Yin Biyun, and he was even more valuable than Liang Bing and Ting Lan to them, so how could they possibly allow him to escape? Fellow Taoist Gu, fellow Taoist Yin, both of you continue attacking Liang Bing and Ting Lan, and you must capture her alive. As for this kid, I'll deal with him, Luo Zhanbei shouted loudly. As he spoke, he'd already charged forward explosively and vanished in midair with a swish. In the next moment, he appeared before Chen Shi, and his palm grabbed fiercely towards Chen Shi's throat. When Chen Shi had just arrived at the 8th level of the Grand Deduction Tower, everyone including those experts at the mysterious Immortal realm didn't notice his arrival because he was standing in that expanse of void. That expanse of void was pitch black and deep, and it was a type of terrifying restriction within the Grand Deduction Tower that lay between the 8th and the 9th levels. If one didn't rely on divine treasures like the Heaven Discernment Ruler, then even a mysterious Immortal realm expert would find it difficult to traverse through this void. Chen Shi didn't want to rashly expose his tracks, so he hid himself within the expanse of void while calmly observing everything that was occurring in the 8th level of the tower. He saw Luo Zixuan roaring with complacent laughter while intending to capture Liang Bing, and he similarly saw Ting Lan suffer a heavy injury for the sake of rescuing Liang Bing, and he was talking with the tiny cauldron throughout this period. Because Chen Shi was well aware that not to mention going against a mysterious Immortal realm expert, with his current strength, merely the pressure emanated from them was sufficient to take his life. Under such a dangerous and pressing situation, he could only rely on the strength of the tiny cauldron to possibly be able to win a chance of survival. However, the tiny cauldron's reply caused his heart to sink. The reason was very simple. The tiny cauldron told him frankly that it had just awakened, causing its strength to be far inferior than before. Even if it had instantly refined and consumed those peerless divine treasures, it was temporarily unable to go against an expert at the mysterious Immortal realm. It was only capable of assisting Chen Shi alone to leave the tower safely. As for rescuing Liang Bing and Ting Lan from the hands of mysterious Immortal realm experts, it was utterly incapable of accomplishing it. The tiny cauldron refused extremely firmly, but Chen Shi was unable to arouse the slightest feeling of displeasure because he knew very clearly that the tiny cauldron was an existence that had always been calm to the point of being emotionless. Besides him, the tiny cauldron was utterly indifferent to the lives of others. In this way, Chen Shi could only give up his intentions to rely on the tiny cauldron to go against Luo Zhanbei and the others. But he didn't give up his intentions to rescue Liang Bing and Teng Lang. The tiny cauldron was the tiny cauldron, and it acted for its own good, whereas Chen Shi was Chen Shi, so how could he possibly watch as Liang Bing and Ting Lan died? Even if he was clearly aware that he would be charging to his death, but when he saw Luo Zhanbei and the others were about to capture Liang Bing and Ting Lan, he still charged out resolutely. He did it purely for the sake of feeling at ease. This was Chen Shi. He treated his enemies ruthlessly and mercilessly, and he was icy cold like a god of slaughter to them. But when it came to his friends, his righteousness soared into the clouds and he would go through a baptism of fire for them. He was naturally aware that it was impossible for him to rescue Liang Bing and Teng Lang, and he would die along with them instead. Moreover, he was very well aware that the most calm and correct path of action was to continue enduring patiently and wait for his strength to become formidable before taking revenge for Liang Bing and Teng Lan. But in that way it would be difficult for him to be at ease for his entire lifetime. His Tao was unlike anyone else. and he wouldn't be Xianxia if he watched on as his friends died. Took a long time to explain this, but only an instant had passed. Luo Zhanbei shouted explosively like a thunderclap from the 9 heavens, and he instantly grabbed towards the top of Xianxia's head. This grab was extremely casual, yet at the hands of a mysterious immortal realm expert, it was capable of tearing the heavens and the earth apart, and merely its imposing aura was sufficient to shatter the soul of an expert at the earthly immortal realm. But Xianxia was prepared since the beginning. After he slashed off Luo Zixuan's arm with a single strike, his entire body had already swiftly retreated and dodged into the expansive void behind him. Bang! This strike of Luo Zhanbei seemed as if it was struck into a bottomless abyss, and it was completely neutralized by the restrictions within the void. It was just an iota away from killing Xianxia, yet it was unable to succeed in the end. But even if Xianxia had dodged away from the strike, the aftershock from the energy contained within it shook Xianxia's figure, causing the vital blood in his entire body roiled endlessly as if he was smashed fiercely by a sledgehammer, and he almost spat blood. This was the might of an expert at the mysterious immortal realm, an expert that had surpassed the ordinary and become an immortal, grasped the laws, and was even more terrifying than a heavenly immortal. It was absolutely not something that could be resisted by the energy of the mortal dimension. You lucky little bastard. You've actually grasped the profundity of the restrictions within the tower. Looks like the cultivation technique in the 10th level has really fallen into your hands. Luo Zhanbei was slightly stunned from missing the strike, and as he looked at Xianxia who stood within the void, he instantly understood everything. Besides a strand of dense killing intent, his gaze surged with burning greed. In the next moment he'd already shouted, "Little fellow, quickly hand over that cultivation technique and I'll leave your corpse intact. Otherwise, if I make a move myself, the consequences won't be as simple as just death." If it wasn't for the obstruction of the restrictions in that expanse of the void, he would have charged over directly and wouldn't be bothered to waste his breath on a little ant. Of course, if he exerted all his might, he wouldn't be afraid of those restrictions. But as far as he was concerned, Xianxia's lowly cultivation was utterly unworthy of him exhausting such great energy to annihilate. Doing that would be flattering Xianxia, right? Let them go and I'll hand the cultivation technique over to you. Otherwise, no one will get it. Xianxia's expression was indifferent as he spoke coldly, and he was utterly unafraid of Luo Zhanbei's threats. Absolutely not, the distant Liang Bing cried out. But in next to no time, she was unable to continue speaking because Teng Lan was heavily injured and on the verge of death, whereas she was practically on the verge of exhaustion. So they were already imminent danger while facing the black-robed man, Gu Jiuzhen, and Yin Biyun. You still being stubborn when you're about to die? You're truly a bitch. Once you're captured, I'll surely ravage and humiliate you to death. Luo Zixuan spoke with disdain while a wisp of a ghastly and cruel arc curved on the corners of his mouth. Bastard! I've already given you a chance, yet you actually have the delusion of trying to bargain with me? You simply don't know what's good for you. Luo Zhanbei frowned and berated. Yes or no, it's as simple as that. Xianxia was completely unafraid, and his voice was calm and icy cold. How audacious! I've killed countless young men like you. Are you sure you want to be the next? Luo Zhanbei pointed at Xianxia while flaring with rage, and the killing intent in his eyes transformed into bolts of crackling lightning that flashed without end. A trace of fury had been aroused in him because a little ant dared to be so unyielding against him. Xianxia stayed silent and just stared coldly at Luo Zhanbei. Third martial ancestor, why waste your breath on that little bastard? I'll give you the Dao Severance Sword. Slash apart that restriction and annihilate him. Luo Zixuan shouted explosively while he flicked his hand, causing a wisp of flowing light to fly into Luo Zhanbei's hand. This was an ancient bronze sword that seemed simple and ordinary, and its outline was even slightly coarse. But when it fell into Luo Zhanbei's hand, it emanated a terrifying and almost monstrous fierce aura that seemed like it was capable of severing the Grand Dao and throwing the workings of the heavens into chaos. The Dao Severance Sword. It was a chaotic divine artifact that was equally famous as the Heaven Discernment Ruler, Earth God Seal, and World Suppression Tower, and it was controlled by the demon forefather Luoshang. The laws of the Heaven Dao within the Talisman dimension was the contribution of the Dao Severance Sword. This Dao Severance Sword in Luo Zixuan's possession was naturally a copy, but it was absolutely not something an immortal artifact could compare to, especially because a trace of the aura of the true Dao Severance Sword was branded within it, causing it to be extremely profound and carry a certain level of resistance towards the restrictions within the Grand Deduction Tower. Xianxia's calm eyes finally constricted slightly when he saw this, and his expression became serious. On the other hand, Luo Zhanbei laughed in a ghastly manner as he said, "Good, very good. Since a little ant was able to struggle until this moment, then perishing in beneath the Dao Severance Sword can be considered to be a form of fortune." As he spoke, he'd already taken a step forward while the immortal energy in his body rumbled, and his body was interweaved by the laws, causing him to seem like a raging god. The Dao Severance Sword in his hand transformed into a ray of light that penetrated the sky as it slashed down. Rumble! How terrifying was the might of a copy of a chaotic divine artifact in the hands of a mysterious immortal realm expert. Before this, Xianxia was unable to give a clear answer to this. But at this moment he finally experienced it. The might of this sword hadn't even arrived before him when the vital blood in his entire body stiffened while his vital energy stopped circulating. And he seemed as if he was an ordinary person that had fallen into the boundless sea, and even struggling to breathe was an extravagant hope. It was too terrifying. Indescribable terrifying. It was like the Heaven Dao, and everything in the world was about to be easily annihilated under this sword strike, and it caused one to feel despair and helpless. Bang! A gap was easily torn open in the restrictions in the void, and then the sword chi descended, causing Xianxia to feel that it was difficult to even muster the strength to move a single finger. "Senior, are you still not going to make a move?" How could Xianxia be willing to sit there and wait for death? He intended to seek assistance from the tiny cauldron to temporarily avoid this terrifying strike. However, the tiny cauldron seemed as if it had fallen into silence once more, and it didn't even react in the slightest. At this critical moment, never had Xianxia imagined that such an unexpected event would actually occur, and his feelings were indescribably complicated. Could it be that I'm really going to? When this thought flashed past Xianxia's mind, he felt his body was suddenly grabbed by someone before lightly carried off to escape danger in the next moment. Bang! The sword chi that Luo Zhanbei slashed out with the Dao Severance Sword rumbled as it descended and directly plowed open an extremely enormous rift in that expansive void. And it was an extremely shocking scene and seemed as if it had separated yin and yang and slashed open the world. Xianxia was shocked and knew that if he was pulled away the slightest bit slower, then he would really have been finished. "Senior, since you intended to make a move, then don't terrify me." Xianxia laughed bitterly, and he still felt a lingering fear as he recalled the scene from before. Only by truly facing the might of an expert at the mysterious immortal realm would one be able to understand how terrifying it was. The tiny cauldron didn't answer and remained silent. This caused Xianxia to be stunned. Right at this moment, a clear and pleasant voice resounded out by his ear. "Little junior brother, I'm sorry, I'm slightly late." When he heard this extremely familiar voice, Xianxia's entire body stiffened before he turned to look. Sure enough, he saw his senior sister Liang that had a picturesque appearance and was dressed up like a man standing by his side, and her clear and deep eyes carried a trace of self-blame while she patted his shoulder with slight guilt. Instantly, Xianxia, originally anxious and heavy feelings eased up and calmed down. It seemed as if so long as Liang was present, he would remain unharmed even if the sky were to collapse. At this moment, the atmosphere in the 8th level of the tower instantly froze. The black-robed man, Gu Jiuzhen, and Yin Biyun resolutely abandoned their attacks, whereas the eyes of Liang Bing and Teng Lan lit up while a wisp of hope burned once more within them. As for Luo Zixuan and Luo Zhanbei, their expressions sank, and they were surprised and bewildered, because all of them had recognized Liang as soon as they laid eyes on her. And this young woman that was dressed as a man was surprisingly that Ali that had ascended the top of the tower 3,000 years ago. Why has she suddenly made an appearance here? The eyes of Luo Zixuan and the others flickered and was filled with surprise and bewilderment. "Don't worry, Everyone that offended you today won't be able to escape. Li Yang stood on the tip of her toes as she patted Xianxia on the shoulder, and she spoke with a gentle and amiable voice like an elder sister consoling her little brother. But when she turned around and faced Luo Zixuan and the others, her expression had already turned icy cold, indifferent, and emotionless. Li Yang wore white-colored male clothes, was tall, beautiful, charming, had picturesque features, and seemed like someone that had walked out of a painting. But when she said that no one that had offended Xianxia today would be able to escape, the hearts of everyone besides Xianxia went cold, and they felt as if they were abandoned by the world, alone and isolated. This was like the feeling of a sinner that had been judged by the heaven Tao, was universally condemned, and cast aside by the grand Tao, because they acutely sensed that the airflow, space, dust, and even the layer upon layer of restrictions on the stairway in the 8th level seemed to have become infuriated, and it rejected and refused them and seemed as if it intended to tear them into shreds. What sort of cultivation is this? Merely a single sentence was capable of making the heaven and the earth submit and act according to her will. Moreover, all of them mysterious immortal realm experts were actually unable to change this. In merely an instant, the pupils of Luo Zixuan, Luo Zhanbei, and the others constricted while their expressions turned serious. This young woman that appeared abruptly hadn't just ascended the top of the tower 3,000 years ago by herself. She was even able to easily rescue Xianxia from Luo Zhanbei, so her strength was absolutely not ordinary. It was even to the extent that Luo Zhanbei and the other mysterious immortal realm experts were actually unable to see through the young woman's strength. On the other hand, unlike everyone else, the appearance of Liang caused Liang Bing and Tung Lan to feel peerless divine energy surge into their bodies, and it was like the most precious ancient herbs in the world as it nourished and repaired their injuries. Moreover, even Tung Lan's lethal heavy injury from before was recovering gradually. After all, both of them were experts at the mysterious immortal realm and had suffered such heavy injuries. With their abilities, they were unable to completely recover without spending a few years of time. But now, Li Yang hadn't even said a single word, yet the injuries on their bodies had already started to heal automatically, and such extraordinary ability caused both of them to be shocked in their hearts. This was even more terrifying than causing techniques to arise with a single word because everything happened with a single thought, and it simply followed according to her will and surpassed all laws. Young miss, could it be that you want to interfere in the grievances of the 4 great clans? Suddenly, Luo Zhanbei shouted out explosively like rumbling thunder, and it caused everyone to suddenly return to their senses. Li Yang raised her eyes, and it was indifferent like a calm pool of water as she said, "Don't worry. I wouldn't be concerned in the slightest even if your 4 great clans are completely annihilated. But unfortunately, all of you really shouldn't have offended someone you couldn't afford to offend, and for the sake of making up for the guilt in my heart, I can only slaughter all of you." Bullshit. Luo Zixuan somehow mustered up the courage to shout loudly. So what if you ascended the top of the tower 3,000 years ago? Countless existences from my 4 great clans have ascended the top of the tower since the creation of the talisman dimension, and you're at most just one of them. Who gave you the authority to dare speak such outrageous and absurd words? Liang didn't even spare Luo Zixuan a glance, and she just turned to look at Xianxia and ask, "Little junior brother, you probably understand the origins of the Grand Deduction Tower now, right?" Xianxia nodded. He was of course aware, and if he considered it carefully, the tower was actually a treasure of his sect. Liang smiled. "Then do you think he's laughable?" Xianxia started smiling as well, and then he nodded. "Truthfully speaking, I've never seen such a laughable person since the moment I started cultivating." Both of them chatted as if there was no one else present, and they seemed as if they took everyone else to be non-existent, causing balls of the flames of rage to burn in the hearts of Luo Zhanbei and the other mysterious immortal realm experts. They're going too far. When had all of them who'd surpassed the scope of the mortal dimension been disregarded by others like this? On the other hand, Luo Zixuan was even stunned while he revealed an embarrassed expression, and he gritted his teeth as he roared. "Third martial ancestor. Kill. Kill these damnable bastards. We have so many experts on our side. How could we be unable to deal with her alone?" Liang suddenly turned her head and glanced coldly at Luo Zixuan. At this moment, her gaze was like two cold bolts of lightning that tore through the sky and penetrated through space. Luo Zixuan felt his scalp go numb while his soul felt as if it was struck by lightning. After he was glanced at, it felt as if two silver dragons had charged into his heart and caused his vital blood to roil, and he coughed out a mouthful of blood while his figure staggered back and almost fell to the ground. This was astounding because a single gaze had awed Luo Zixuan to the point blood sprayed from his mouth. What sort of might is this? Luo Zhanbei's heart jerked while he felt even more terrified. After all, they were experts at the mysterious immortal rank, yet they were utterly incapable of achieving that. Brother Luo, we can't hesitate any longer. Let's make a move in unison and annihilate this woman first. The mysterious black-clothed man spoke abruptly with a hoarse and low voice that sounded like a venomous snake flicking its tongue, and it caused others to feel a chill run down their spines. As soon as these words were spoken, killing intent flashed in the eyes of Luo Zhanbei, Gu Jiuzhen, and Yin Biyun, and they practically didn't hesitate in the slightest to attack in unison. Practically all those that were capable of attaining their accomplishments were ferocious figures that had walked out from mountains of corpses and seas of blood, and they possessed abundant combat experience, so there was utterly no need for any further discussion before they could act in the most resolute manner. Rumble. Four mysterious immortal rank experts attacked in unison. They controlled the energy of the laws and blasted out blazing divine radiances that possessed extremely terrifying might. They attacked in unison while the energy of the laws they emanated linked together, causing them to be like four divine mountains that were moving side by side. They carried awe-inspiring and murderous auras, and they seemed like gods that intended to annihilate everyone in the world that resisted them. Even if he stood behind Liang, Xianxia's heart was still shocked as he sensed an extremely great gap in strength. The gap was truly too large. The gap between the nether transformation realm and the mysterious immortal realm was simply like the distance between an ant and an eagle, and they couldn't be mentioned in the same breath. But Liang's expression remained calm as before when facing this scene, and she was composed and aloof. Her white hand gestured, causing the heavens and the earth before her to instantly change. Instantly, boundless radiance surged out with a rumble while countless extremely dazzling mysterious symbols were developed, and they were suffused with the aura of the gods and surged with monstrous divine light. When looked at from afar, it was like an extremely complicated and dense talisman, and it was filled with surging energy of lightning as it blasted down with a might sufficient to shred the world. Merely a single strike didn't just deal with the attacks of the four mysterious immortal realm experts. It even separated out an expanse of dense talisman markings that seemed like a cloud that blotted out the sky, and it enveloped Gu Jiuzhen. Gu Jiuzhen was shocked as he sensed the lethal aura that was contained within it, and then his expression changed completely. The descendants of Gu Yuanxuan are really becoming more and more worthless. You aren't even able to recognize the dark lightning divine talisman that's inherited in your own clan. Liang spoke in a light voice. The divine talisman glowed as it interweaved to form dazzling and resplendent energy of lightning that drowned the entire surroundings, and it caused Gu Jiuzhen to be terrified and furious as he exhausted all his strength to resist yet was still on the verge of being crushed. Liang strode out and moved over with an aloof bearing. Her clothes fluttered while she seemed to have transcended the mortal world, and she raised finger and pointed towards the dark lightning divine talisman from afar, causing it to seem like a myriad of lightning mountains that crushed down at Gu Jiuzhen. Bang! Gu Jiuzhen's entire body was directly shattered into powder and was drowned within the lightning talisman markings. Only his head was tossed out from within, and it carried an expression of terror, unwillingness, horror, and disbelief. A supreme, mysterious immortal was annihilated with a single strike just like this. Thump! His head fell to the ground. A mysterious immortal realm expert had died just like this with dilated pupils and a face covered in bewilderment and terror, and he'd lost just like this. He'd become an immortal yet was unable to live forever, and it was impossible for him to rest in peace. Luo Zhanbei and the others stopped abruptly and felt it was difficult to breathe. They were almost unable to accept that what had happened was reality. How could it be like this? Such a scene had exceeded their expectations. That was a supreme and formidable mysterious immortal realm expert that had grasped the energy of the laws and surpassed the mortal dimension to wander the universe and transform the ordinary into extraordinary. So how could he be so weak and be annihilated so easily? Xianxia was shocked in his heart as well. Never had he imagined that his senior sister would actually be so ferocious, and a casual attack of hers would eliminate the life of a mysterious immortal realm expert. Exactly what sort of extraordinary cultivation would be needed to achieve this? Not to mention Xianxia, even Liang Bing and Tinglan's eyes were stared wide open, while they didn't dare believe that this was that Ali they were familiar with. The Dark Lightning Divine Talisman. That's the Gu clan's ancestral secret technique. Why is it in your hands? Luo Jinbei spoke with a low voice. He, In Biyun, and the black-robed man seemed as if they were facing a great enemy since a long time ago. Every single one of them had circulated their cultivations with all their might, causing them to emanate divine light like 3 gushing volcanoes, and they were protecting themselves. They'd already noticed that the situation was bad, and the circumstances were slightly unusual. The ability of the young woman before them was too terrifying and exceeded their expectations, causing them to feel an extreme threat coming from her. Originally, they wanted to crush Xianxia and seize the cultivation technique from the 10th level of the Grand Deduction Tower. But now, they'd fallen into a dangerous situation and might even perish here, so they couldn't help but have heavy feelings. It was always the inheritance of my sect. So why can't I possess it? Li Yang spoke indifferently. Even though she'd decided to annihilate these people, there wasn't any trace of mortal emotion on her face, and it was aloof and indifferent. What? Absolutely impossible. Luo Zhanbei was shocked. Even though he wasn't a member of the Gu clan, he knew extremely well that the Dark Lightning Divine Talisman was the passed down by the Gu clan's ancestor, the Dark Emperor Yuan Sun. So how could it possibly be the inheritance of the sect behind this young woman? Only Xianxia faintly guessed something when he heard the world's Dark Lightning Divine Talisman, because he'd grasped 5 divine talismans as well. But they were just different from this divine talisman. Then why don't you see which inheritance this is? Li Yang spoke indifferently. As she spoke, her pair of white and slender hands flipped, causing dense and profound talisman markings to condense once more in midair, and they interweaved together and roiled to form a jet black and majestic divine glow. The Demon Spirit Divine Talisman. Luo Zhanbei cried out involuntarily while his expression changed repeatedly. This was the secret technique passed down by the Luo clan's ancestor, so how could he possibly not recognize it? Since you've recognized it, then you can die in peace under its might. As Li Yang spoke, she flicked her white sleeve, causing the expanse of jet black and majestic divine radiance that seemed like an ocean of talisman marking to smash down. How could Luo Zhanbei resign himself to death? His entire body glowed like a golden dragon as he held the Dao Severance sword and attacked mightily with the intention of slaughtering out a path to survival. The Dao Severance sword soared into the sky like a ray of light that penetrated the sun, and it charged into the myriad of profound talisman markings. He'd already exerted all his strength in this attack, and it was absolutely the strongest strike of an expert at the mysterious immortal realm. Moreover, its might even rose by 30% because it was executed via the Dao Severance sword. However, Li Yang shook her head instead, and then her white hand fluttered about and developed boundless variations in the divine talisman before she controlled the divine talisman to go head-on against Luo Zhanbei's attack. Rumble. Instantly, the two attacked collided like 2 comets striking each other, and they erupted with boundless blazing divine light that spread throughout the surroundings and drowned the entire 8th level of the Grand Deduction Tower. Bang! Luo Zhanbei held the Dao Severance sword in hand while sword qi seethed, and it flowed with the energy of the laws that glowed brilliantly and carried peerless might. In Biyun didn't hesitate to attack as well when she saw this, and she withdrew a tower-shaped magic treasure before striding towards the battlefield with the hope of lending Luo Zhanbei a hand to resist this great enemy together, because she knew very clearly that the strength of the young woman before her was too terrifying, and it was impossible for any one of them to be a match for her while by themselves. However, She just moved when Liang exerted an expanse of gorgeous, vast, and dense talisman markings that roiled without end, and they transformed into a mysterious divine talisman that enveloped her, causing her to be unable to move an inch. The Phoenix Wind Divine Talisman. How could this be possible? In Biyun's beautiful face turned pale because this divine talisman was the ultimate technique passed down by the ancestor of her In clan. So how could she not recognize it? She struggled with all her might, but it was useless. It seemed as if she'd fallen into the eye of a tempest while a chilly hurricane whistled around here. These were the strong winds a strand of the laws had interwoven together to form, and it was extremely terrifying and caused her to be unable to escape even if she grew wings. Rumble. On the other side, Liang entered into combat with Luo Zhanbei, who held the Dao Severance Sword. She didn't utilize any external items, yet a flip of her white hand caused a myriad of profound talisman markings to spray out. These talisman markings that were dense to the point they were like a storm merged together to transform into the Azurewood Divine Talisman, or the White Metal Divine Talisman, and they were extraordinary, ingenious, and seemed like the embodiment of the Talisman Dao. Only now did Shi notice that the might of the divine talismans could actually be utilized in this way. But he knew his own limitations, and he was extremely aware that it was extremely difficult to accomplish what his senior sister Liang was doing with his current cultivation. The reason was extremely simple. It was because the structure of every single divine talisman was too complicated. All those years ago in the world of stars, merely the inscribing of the talisman markings of the 5 great divine talismans onto the talisman armament consumed 25 years of his time, and that was only the inscribing of the talisman markings. Besides talisman markings, true divine talismans contained the aura of the Tao, accumulated the might of the world, connected with the gods of the world, and so on and so forth. Thus, it was obvious how complicated it was to truly grasp a divine talisman. With Xianxia's current cultivation in the Tao of talismans, he was naturally capable of easily completing numerous steps of the creation of divine talismans. For example, allowing it to contain the aura of the Tao and accumulate the might of the world wasn't difficult to him. But this was still unable to bring forth the true might of a divine talisman. The reason was that it wasn't connected to the gods of the world. With his current cultivation, it was still very difficult for him to sense the existence of the gods, unless he attained a higher cultivation realm. Thus, he was unable to execute various divine talismans that carried extraordinary might and could annihilate mysterious immortal realm experts with a flip of his hand like Liang. But even though he was unable to execute them, it didn't stop Xianxia from observing. The battle between his senior sister Liang and Luo Zhanbei broadened his horizons and allowed him to benefit greatly. It was like a window had been pushed open before him, and he'd seen a different world. Senior sister Liang is probably displaying all this for me. Otherwise, with her ability to crush Gu Jizhen earlier, how could Luo Zhanbei persist until now? She seemed to be lost in thought, and he didn't hesitate to abandon all distracting thoughts in his mind before observing with a calm heart. He was very well aware how precious the opportunity to observe a battle of such a level was, and it carried immeasurable benefits to his future path of cultivation. After all, not everyone was lucky like him and had the chance to see Liang personally demonstrate the profundities of the Talisman Dao. The most aggrieved person was Luo Zhanbei. As soon as the battle started, he noticed that the gap between him and Liang was truly too great, and he was completely led by the nose in the battle. He was like a worm that had fallen into the net of a spider. Not to mention killing his opponent, even escaping was difficult. It was even to the extent that as he looked at Liang, who had a relaxed bearing and seemed to be taking an idle stroll in a courtyard, Luo Zhanbei felt as if he was being played the monkey. He was jumping up and down, and he didn't have the slightest elegant demeanor of a mysterious immortal realm expert. This feeling caused him to be on the verge of spitting blood. But compared to this, the terror in his heart was even deeper. He'd already stopped thinking about whether he would be able to seize the cultivation technique from the 10th level, and he was thinking about how to flee and survive instead. Because this opponent was too terrifying, and it caused him to be unable to estimate exactly how formidable the cultivation of his opponent was. She was formidable to the point that it caused his will to fight to crumble bit by bit. What should I do? Luo Zhanbei was burning with anxiety. He glanced inadvertently, and he suddenly noticed that the black-robed man was actually standing in the distance while watching coldly from the sidelines and had utterly no intention of lending a hand. At this moment, it instantly caused him to fume with rage, and he couldn't help but roar. "Brother Mu, aren't you going to make a move? What are you waiting for?" This black-robed man was called Mu Zheng, and he was an expert Luo Jinbei had gotten to know by chance. They became friends at their first meeting, and coupled with his formidable strength, Luo Jinbei had invited him to participate in the operation this time. Earlier, Mu Zheng's display was really not bad, and it caused him to appreciate it extremely. But now, Mu Zheng's indifferent appearance caused him to be furious in his heart, and he felt as if he was betrayed. Idiot! How could a xenorace like him possibly assist you with all his heart and might? Liang sighed lightly. What? Xenorace? At this moment, it wasn't just Luo Zhenbei who was stunned. Even the eyes of Yin Biyun, Liang Bing, Teng Lan, Chan Shi, and the other focused while they felt slight disbelief. The xenorace was a method of address that the people of the three dimensions used for others from outside the three dimensions. As the saying goes, those that aren't from my race surely possess sinister intentions. In reality, since the three dimensions had existed, the flames of battle with the xenorace had never stopped. Both sides had formed irreconcilable enmity, and it could only be resolved with blood and flames. There was no other way. So this was the reason why everyone reacted in that way when they heard the black-robed man was actually a xenorace expert. The black-robed man continued to stand there without moving when his identity was exposed by Liang, and his eyes' aura was gloomy while his face was covered beneath the black robe, causing him to seem extremely mysterious and composed. All right, I've already told you what you should know, and you can die in peace. Liang spoke with a light voice, and then her attack suddenly changed and became fierce and swift. No, I can help you deal with the xenorace. Luo Zhanbei roared loudly. At the moment of life and death, even an expert at the mysterious immortal realm was no different than an ordinary person from the mortal world. Are you even worthy? Liang replied indifferently with a question, and a single sentence of hers gave Luo Zhanbei the death sentence. In the next moment, her clothes fluttered while she suddenly flashed past Luo Zhanbei like a wisp of chilly starlight, and she carried out a string of golden blood as she cut off a hideous head. Pooh! Fresh blood sprayed out as Luo Zhenbei perished, and another mysterious immortal realm expert had perished just like this at Liang's hands. You? Yin Biyun's voice trembled. Up until now, she was still unable to break free of the confinement of the Phoenix Wind divine talisman. Coupled with witnessing Luo Zhenbei perish, the terror and horror in her heart was obviously intense to the extreme. I've said it before, no one can escape today. Liang spoke with a calm and indifferent expression. I'll fight you with my life on the line. Yin Biyun's hair was disheveled, and she cried out sharply. However, she'd only spoken halfway when her entire body was directly minced into pieces by the Phoenix Wind divine talisman, and not even any residue remained of her. Want to drag me down with you? You're too far away from being capable. Liang shook her head. Why is it like this? Luo Zixuan shuddered in the battlefield before his entire body spasmed, and he fell weakly on the ground while his face was covered in disbelief and dense terror. He'd originally come here aggressively, and he was only an iota away from capturing Chen Shi and obtaining the cultivation technique from the 10th level of the tower. But because of the appearance of a single young woman, the situation had instantly been turned around. 3 mysterious immortal realm experts had perished successively while the black-robed man had become a xenorace expert instead. He was simply unable to accept such a scene. I'll give you a chance to meet death bravely. Liang raised her head and glanced at Luo Zixuan. Her voice didn't carry the slightest trace of a threat, causing it to seem like asking him to commit suicide was a supreme reward, and her peerless, elegant demeanor caused Chen Shi to feel extreme admiration in his heart. Thump! Luo Zixuan was terrified to the point of wetting his pants, and he knelt on the ground while kowtowing repeatedly without end. Please, please let me off this time. I'm the inheritor of the Luo clan, so long. Bang! He hadn't finished speaking when his head had become a crushed watermelon, and his body fell to the ground. Up until the point of his death, He still didn't understand why this young woman before him would be so merciless and ruthless. She didn't feel anything was wrong with this. If it was him, he would surely not waste his breath on Luo Zixuan and kill him with a single strike as well. But when Liang Bing and Teng Lan saw this, it caused both their hearts to shudder. If they considered it carefully, regardless of if it was Luo Zixuan, Luo Zhanbei, Gu Jiuzhen, or Yin Biyun, the strength and identities these people possessed wasn't inferior to the two of them at all. But in Li Yang's hands, they'd become people that were killed at will, and her attitude of casually taking her opponents as nothing caused both of them to feel deep fear. At this moment, they finally confirmed a single thing, and that was the Ali before their eyes was absolutely not as simple as what they were aware of. On the other hand, Liang Bing was even more shocked because she knew very well that Ali was from the mysterious Oracle Mountain and possessed an extremely terrifying background. But never had she imagined that Ali's strength would actually be so formidable. A young woman with a background and strength that was extremely deep like this did indeed have no need to care about any threats from the four great clans. You've already watched the show, so do you still not intend to reveal your true appearance? After she killed Luo Zixuan and the others, Li Yang seemed as if she'd done an extremely ordinary thing, and in the next moment her gaze descended onto the black-robed man, Mu Zheng. Ha ha ha! The show was brilliant indeed. Earlier I was pondering how I should deal with them. Now, you did it for me and allowed me to watch all of you kill each other. It really did resolve a great deal of trouble for me. The black-robed man roared with laughter, and his voice was gloomy and hoarse. As for my appearance, all of you can see it when you've died. As he spoke, his imposing aura changed. His body surged with jet-black lights that seemed like roiling devilish qi, and his aura was actually more than 2 times stronger than before. Do you think you can defeat me here? Li Yang remained composed when she saw this and said indifferently, "Your objective for coming to the Grand Deduction Tower was none other than to investigate the actual situation within the tower, and if you were able to destroy it, then it would conform exactly to your intentions. Unfortunately, you're only the cannon fodder of those Outerium rebels. You don't understand the Talisman Dimension yet dared to arbitrarily move about in the Talisman Dimension. Should I say that your courage deserves compliment, or that you're benighted?" Her voice inadvertently carried a trace of dense ridicule and disdain. Outerium rebel. Xenorace. These 2 words were clearly differentiated by Li Yang, and it caused Chen Shi to faintly feel that there was probably a particular difference in these 2 words. The black-robed man suddenly roared with laughter. "How long has it been since someone had dared to insult me like that? Little girl, you're really audacious. And even I can't help but feel a trace of sympathy for a talented person like you." Even though he spoke like this, but he'd moved out brazenly, and his black robe fluttered like a ball of surging devilish cloud as he charged out explosively with a matchless speed. His target wasn't Li Yang, and it was actually Chen Shi. Perhaps he'd already discerned that so long as he captured Chen Shi, it would be sufficient to threaten Li Yang. At the very least, it would be able to restrain her, and in this way he would be able to grasp the initiative. Swish! The surged jet-black light was like a rumbling tempestuous storm that awakened the deaf, and it emanated a gloomy, ruthless, and bloodthirsty aura. It seemed like the source of all sin in the heavens and the earth, and it caused others to have the terrifying feeling of falling into a bottomless abyss when looking at it from afar. At that day, on the way to Crimson Swallow City from Golden Mulberry Village, She had been swept by the black-robed man's terrifying will, and merely a single glance caused his entire body to go cold and feel as if it had fallen into an abyss. Moreover, he couldn't even arouse the thought of struggling and resisting. Now the black-robed man had released his entire cultivation as he charged forward, and his terrifying imposing aura caused Shi to feel suffocated while his pores felt as if they were pierced by sharp blades and his soul felt as if it was on the verge of being partially frozen and sealed up. "You're overestimating your ability." Right at this moment, a clear cry sounded out as Li Yang's clothes fluttered, and a brilliance that covered the sky appeared on her finger. It was like the brilliance of the sun and moon combined, and it illumined the world while it easily dealt with the black-robed man's attack. At the same time, her beautiful hair fluttered as she grabbed from afar, causing the Dao Severance sword that Luo Zhanbei left behind upon his death to fly over to her. Li Yong spat out a mouthful of qi, causing the Tao Severance sword to shrink abruptly while its energy was compacted within it, and it actually transformed into a golden speck of light that coiled endlessly at the tip of her finger. Instantly, the light, air flow, and dust in the space within the 8th level of the Grand Deduction Tower seemed to have been completely extracted, and everything converged towards the golden light at the tip of her finger, causing the entire space to emanate a feeling of being in the verge of breakdown, collapse, and obliteration. She actually refined the Tao Severance sword and condensed it into the force of a single finger. What sort of ability is this? Liang Bing was horrified and moved. After all, the Tao Severance sword was the divine artifact of the Luo clan that had been inherited for countless years, and it was absolutely not something an ordinary immortal artifact could compare to. However, Li Yong had actually refined it casually, and this ability wasn't something an ordinary person in the immortal dimension could accomplish. This is the Oracle Mountain's Oracle Point. You're a disciple of the Oracle Mountain? The black-clothed man's expression revealed shock as he seemed to have discerned the origins of this attack, and he couldn't help but roar with a grim voice. As he spoke, he moved out without the slightest hesitation. His fingers seemed as if they held the world, and he was like a black sun that emanated boundless jet-black light as he charged at Li Yong. However, his attack hadn't even approached her when it was devoured by a shapeless force, and it seemed like clay that had fallen into the ocean and vanished without a trace. It didn't even cause the slightest ripple to arise, and it was extremely strange. In other words, not only was his full force strike unable to injure Li Yong, it wasn't even able to touch her figure. Little junior brother, this is the Oracle Point, one of the inheritances of our sect that isn't passed down outside the sect. Once you cultivate and become a heavenly immortal, you'll be able to communicate with the gods of the world, condense the 5 great divine talismans to reside in the 5 elements within your body, and accumulate myriads of strands of the energy of derivation within a single finger. Nothing will survive under the might of a single point. Li Yong spoke with a light voice, and when she spoke the last word, the speck of light at the tip of her finger was already dazzling and resplendent to the limit. It had seized all the radiance in the world and droned before it suddenly shot out violently, and it directly shot towards the space between the black-robed man's brows. At this instant, it seemed as if time and space had been frozen and fell into indescribable silence. As the saying goes, things will go in the opposite direction when an extreme limit is reached. When it was dazzling and resplendent to the limit, and returned to calm instead, causing everything in the world to lose the ability to make any noise. Shit! The black-robed man finally realized how formidable it was, and his expression turned pale and carried a trace of panic. He howled towards the sky before dodging and retreating explosively without the slightest hesitation. Bang! However, in the next moment, the space between his brows was penetrated while his entire body flew backward and fell to the ground with a thump. The Oracle Point. All those years ago, the divine beings of my race perished under this strike, yet I never imagined that a day would come where I, Mu Zhang, would follow in their footsteps. Amidst this muttering, the black-robed man's entire body rumbled as it transformed into ash and perished. Everyone, including Xianxia, was awed by the might of this point when they saw this scene, and it caused them to break out in cold sweat from fear because such a strike was too terrifying. It exceeded their imagination and was miraculous. Unfortunately, with my ability, I could only sacrifice an immortal weapon for the sake of annihilating this person. If it was executed by third senior brother, then the might of a faraway point would be able to easily annihilate a world. Li Yong shook her head and seemed to be rather dissatisfied with her strength. But when these words entered into the ears of Li Yong and Teng Lan, they were completely speechless instead, and they didn't know how to describe their feelings at this moment. Up until this point, everyone that came to the Grand Deduction Tower with Luo Zixuan had perished, and it included 3 mysterious immortal realm experts, a xenorace expert, the inheritors of the Gu, Yin, and Luo clans in the Talisman Dimension, and all the young masters and young mists from the immortal dimension. Of course, Nan Shouchong, Wan Renyi, and the others hadn't died completely, and a strand of their soul still remained in the immortal dimension. But even if they recovered, their strengths would be greatly inferior to before, and they would have to cultivate from the beginning. To some cultivators, this was simply more tormenting than being killed directly. After all, cultivators pursued the heaven Tao. After all is said and done, what they pursued was the strength to control their own lives. So the sense of loss that they suffered when the cultivation they experienced countless hardships to attain had been lost could torment a cultivator to the point of madness. Because only by grasping strength would they be able to control their own fate, win the respect of others, obtain boundless wealth, and establish an eternal foundation for their clans. It could be said that in the cultivation world, if one possessed strength, then it would be equivalent to possessing everything. On the other hand, the loss of strength meant the loss of all this, so could anyone accept such an enormous drop? For example, after some cultivators in the cultivation world had their cultivations crippled and became an ordinary person, they died before their lifespan came to an end, and it was because they were unable to endure the torture from losing their strength. All those years ago, if it wasn't for him knowing that he had to bring up Xianxia and Qian Hao, Qianxi's grandfather, Qian Tianli, would have probably been unable to endure the enormous drop from having his cultivation crippled and would have died in depression. Senior sister Luo Zhanbei and all these others probably haven't been completely annihilated, right? Qianxi recalled Nan Xiuchong and the others, and he couldn't help but frown and ask. The status of a mysterious immortal in the immortal dimension was surely higher than these descendants of immortals like Nan Xiuchong and Wen Renyi, so they would surely leave behind a trace of soul in their sex for the sake of avoiding complete death. It's impossible. Little junior brother, they offended you. So how could I dare allow them to have a chance at surviving? Li Yang's eyes curved as she smiled in an extremely charming manner. She was always like this when facing Qianxi, and she liked to tease and ridicule him. Qianxi was astounded. This is probably very difficult to achieve, right? As far as he was concerned, since the souls of these mysterious immortals were stored in the immortal dimension, they were in a practically invincible position. But his senior sister Li Yang said they died completely. Exactly how heaven-defying is such ability? You'll be able to accomplish it very soon as well. Li Yang chuckled with a gaze that was clear like water. Ali, thank you very much for this. Meanwhile, Teng Lan and Liang Bing had walked over before bowing in unison. Their attitudes were sincere and serious, and they even carried a trace of deep reverence. At this moment, both of them didn't dare take Liang to be that Ali they knew any longer. There's no need to thank me, so long as you don't use me in your schemes in the future. Liang glanced at Liang Bing with an indifferent expression. This glance caused Liang's beautiful face to turn red, and she was slightly uncomfortable. Such a bearing appearing on a peerlessly beautiful, icy cold, imposing, and mighty woman like her was extremely rare. She naturally understood what Liang was saying. During the trip to the Grand Deduction Tower this time, the reason she'd placed all hope on Qianxi was because she had the intention of relying on Liang's strength. After all, the strength of Luo Zixuan's group was too enormous, and it was extremely difficult for her and Teng Lan to deal with them with their strengths. She was only able to strive for a slight chance by disregarding everything and betting everything on Qianxi. Otherwise, with her pride as a mysterious immortal, she would absolutely not attach such importance to Qianxi to the point of even sending Teng Lan to follow Qianxi all along the way. Fortunately, she'd made the right bet. Liang had made an appearance at the critical moment, allowing her to transform from a heavily injured underdog that was on the verge of death into the final victor. But after she witnessed Liang's strength with her own two eyes, Liang Bing was very sure that it was precisely because of Qianxi that Liang didn't blame her. Otherwise, she might suffer punishment. I guarantee that there'll absolutely not be a second time. Liang Bing took a deep breath and spoke seriously. Qianxi was watching from the sidelines since the beginning, and he faintly guessed something, causing him to be unable to help but sigh emotionally in his heart. There really is no hate without reason, and there's similarly no kindness without reason. Of course, he didn't resent Liang Bing's intentions. After all, she and Teng Lan had helped him greatly in the talisman dimension, and compared to that, it was he who ought to express his gratitude. Let's go. The Grand Deduction Tower is about to close once more. We'll leave first and talk later. Liang stretched out her hand to grab Qianxi's hand, and then she raised her eyes to look at Liang and said, Follow me as well if you want to obtain that cultivation technique from the 10th level. As she spoke, a wisp of chilly starlight suffused her entire body, and then she vanished instantly with Xianxia. Uncle Lan, let's leave as well. Liang Bing turned around to glance at Ting Lan. Wait, eldest young miss. Since Ali is able to grasp the Dark Lightning Divine Talisman, Demon Spirit Divine Talisman, and the Phoenix Wind Divine Talisman, then do you think she knows our Liang clan's Eastern Myrtle Divine Talisman? Ting Lan spoke abruptly. This is probably very likely. Liang Bing hesitated before she spoke. So, I suspect that Ali is probably deeply related to our talisman dimension, or perhaps the Oracle Mountain that stands behind her is related to the talisman dimension. Ting Lan sighed with emotion. The Oracle Mountain is one of the most mysterious sects in the 3 dimensions. If we're able to form a relationship with it, then even if eldest young miss returns to the immortal dimension, perhaps you'll be able to become eminent and control the highest authority in the clan. Liang Bing was stunned while extraordinary splendor rippled in her eyes, and she was obviously moved slightly. But right after that, she shook her head and said, "Forget it. Don't hope for too much. You saw it as well earlier. Ali doesn't take our 4 great clans seriously at all, and even if there's a relationship, we can't even compare to 1,000th of how important Xianxia is to her." When she finished speaking, even she felt slightly envious of Xianxia. With such a senior sister that possesses extraordinary ability, where can't you go in the entire world? Not long after Liang Bing and Ting Lan left, the Grand Deduction Tower that stood towering within the imperial city of 4 emperors for countless years closed once more amidst a wave of rumbling. At the same time, all the cultivators within the tower were forcefully teleported out of the tower by a shapeless force. This caused everyone to be astounded. Isn't this too fast? Only so little time has passed. Could it be that the mysterious cultivation technique in the 10th level has already been obtained? Someone spoke with bewilderment. Probably. It isn't like such a thing hasn't occurred in history. But the period of time the Grand Deduction Tower was left open this time was indeed a bit too short. Do all of you think that it was the experts of the 4 great clans that obtained that mysterious cultivation technique? Of course. But where are they? Why has no one come out up until now? The crowd discussed animatedly while they stayed around the surroundings of the tower. They wanted to confirm exactly which lucky person had obtained the mysterious cultivation technique at the 10th level this time. Unfortunately, they didn't obtain the slightest bit of information about it even until the veil of night descended, and under their helplessness, they could only disperse successively with wonder in their hearts. Just like this, the curtains to the trip into the Grand Deduction Tower that happened every 3,000 years had been drawn. Even though most of the cultivators weren't able to achieve their wishes of ascending the 10th level. But they'd obtained the precious treasures they wanted from the myriad balls. So this trip wasn't in vain. That night, at a quiet and elegant small courtyard in the imperial city of 4 emperors. Looking up into the sky in the talisman dimension would allow one to see a scene of a myriad of fist-sized stars flickering while flowing with a clear radiance, and they twinkled while seeming to be profound and deep. Liang sat on a rattan chair made of ancient wood while her hands held up her jade-white chin, and she grinned as she looked at Xianxia, who was busy cooking delicacies in the distance while her beautiful face was covered in satisfaction. At this moment, she was like a free and lively young woman, and the scene of her bathing beneath the veil of night that had starlight drifting down from it was extremely beautiful, beautiful to the point others couldn't bear to continue looking. In next to no time, strands of tempting fragrance suffused the air, and it caused one's appetite to be aroused. Xianxia excitedly placed numerous plates of dish that he'd prepared painstakingly onto the table, and then he sat cross-legged before Liang and helped her pour a cup of immortal wine. After that, he passed over a pair of chopsticks and asked with a voice that carried a trace of anticipation, "Senior sister, give it a try." Liang smiled and revealed snow-white teeth that were like pearls, and she was beautiful and extraordinary as she nodded and said, "Yes, yes. Little junior brother prepared a feast for me with all his heart. I'm truly overwhelmed by the unexpected favor." Xianxia poured a cup of wine for himself before he raised his cup and said, "I've always not known how to repay senior sister, so I can only dedicate some small intentions of me. I'll drink this cup first as a show of respect." As soon as he finished speaking, he finished the wine in his cup. Li Yang's cherry lips puckered before he finished the wine in her cup as well, and then she successively tasted all the dishes on the table that were appealing to the eye, fragrant, and delicious before she sighed emotionally with satisfaction. "If I'm able to be so relaxed every single day, then I would even be willing to not return to Oracle Mountain." Xianxia was stunned, and then he said seriously, "Senior sister, if you're too tired, then allow yourself to rest for some time. Don't push yourself too hard." Li Yang put down the chopsticks and rubbed her brows before she said, "Little junior brother, you don't understand. No matter if it's the gods, Buddhas, or Tao lords, everyone in the numerous worlds in the universe desire to seize the opportunity when the three dimensions undergoes an upheaval to seek a trace of opportunity. A battle at this level doesn't allow for the slightest carelessness. Unfortunately, Master still hasn't returned. Otherwise..." As she spoke, she fell into silence, and she seemed to be in deep contemplation, yet seemed to be planning her next step as well. She didn't disturb her and just sat there silently. He didn't know anything about Li Yang, and it could be said to be a blank slate to him. Moreover, because of the enormous gap in their cultivations, it was utterly impossible for him to join in. Of course, he was curious, but he still forcefully refrained himself from asking. As far as he was concerned, he had enough problems, so if he paid attention to these things that he was far from being able to come into contact with, he would obviously be looking for unnecessary worries. After a short moment, Li Yang returned to her senses, and she smiled apologetically and said, "I'm sorry, little junior brother." She smiled before raising his hand to pour a cup of wine for her, and then he said, "Senior sister, even though my cultivation is shallow, I understand a single thing. Cultivation is all about moving forward boldly and killing resolutely. Moreover, during this process, I must comprehend the heavens Tao and stay true to my heart. That is all that's needed." Li Yang's eyes curved into arcs as she revealed a sly and charming smile and said, "Exactly. Just as those old baldies from the Buddhist sect repeat over and over, if the heart is empty, then how can it be tainted? Haha, let's not mention all this. It's rare for me to be so free, so the two of us should toast each other and drink to our heart's content." She roared with laughter. "Since senior sister is in the mood, then junior brother will surely accompany you until the end." The night breeze blew gently while starlight flowed down. Within the quiet courtyard, the pair of junior brother and senior sister had a rare meeting, and they drank wine while overflowing with happiness. Both of them tacitly refrained from mentioning those matters from before. Li Yang guided Xianxia in many things. For example, how to avoid the detection of the heaven Tao with the immeasurable virtue technique and smoothly advance to the earthly immortal realm, how to utilize the Eastern Myrtle Divine Talisman, the Dark Lightning Divine Talisman, the Phoenix Wind Divine Talisman, the Demon Spirit Divine Talisman, and Oracle Point. She listened to the point his mind shook while his thoughts stretched endlessly. He frequently sought advice in a low voice, and he would usually become suddenly enlightened after Li Yang explained it. During this entire process, he finally understood that these 4 new divine talismans that he'd learned were actually part of the inheritance of Oracle Mountain, and it was the sect's founding ancestor Fuxi that passed it down to the 4 great figures that created the talisman dimension. It was precisely because of this that these 4 divine talismans had become the inheritance of the Liang, Gu, Yin, and Luo clans. According to what Li Yang said, the Eastern Emperor Taizhun, the Dark Emperor Yuan Sun, the Phoenix Queen Yinggu, and the demon forefather Luoshang weren't disciples of Oracle Mountain, and they could only be considered as Dao attendants by Fuxi's side. Dao attendant was an extremely ancient word that was extremely prevalent in the primeval times. At that time, sects stood like trees in a forest while there were numerous great figures in the world, and besides their personal disciples, there were numerous admirers that pursued them. These people didn't have the status of disciple, yet they willingly followed by the side of the great figure, and they possessed the qualifications to stand at the side and listen while the great figure preached about the Tao. But they were unable to obtain the personal guidance of the great figure in relation to the profound parts of what the great figure had spoken about. These people were Tao attendants. Besides causing Xianxia to be astounded, He couldn't help but sigh even emotionally about how formidable his sect was. Great figures like the Eastern Emperor Taijin that created the talisman dimension was actually a mere Dao attendant by Fushi's side when he just started cultivating. How could this not be shocking? This caused Chun Shi to finally understand why Li Yang's bearing and words would actually be so composed and disdainful when facing Luo Zixuan and the others. It was because their status was miles apart. One side was a personal disciple of Oracle Mountain, whereas the other side was the descendants of the Dao attendants by the side of the founder of Oracle Mountain, Fushi. Both of them couldn't be mentioned in the same breath at all. Of course, very few people knew of this, and even an inheritor of her clan like Liang Bing was utterly unable to know of such secrets. If it wasn't for this, then no matter how bold he was, Luo Zixuan wouldn't dare be presumptuous before Liang in the slightest. After he drank to his heart's content, Chun Shi suddenly thought of something and asked, "Senior sister, could it be that there's something particular to pay attention to between Xenorace and Outerium rebels?" Liang said casually, "The existences perceived as Outerium Xenorace by the people of the three dimensions now are only rebels that were exiled from the three dimensions all those years ago. For example, Saint Emperor Xianxia that you saw in the Dark Parasol's Abyss and Saint Emperor Qi Yan that was sealed in the Ninth Hell were actually from the three dimensions in the past." Chun Shi instantly sobered up partially when he heard this, and he said with astonishment, "Why is it like this?" Liang thought for a moment, and her words were simply, yet it was shocking, none other than a struggle of the Tao. The losers are always in the wrong, and they were taken to be rebels by the heaven Tao of the three dimensions in the end. A struggle of the Tao? Chun Shi faintly understood something, but when he thought about it carefully, such a match had implications that were too great, and he was utterly incapable of figuring it out with his current knowledge. He was only able to very simply think that it was like how the immortal sects and devil sects were like fire and water, and they wouldn't stop fighting until one side perished. Since the ancient time, they were in a hostile state. But a Tao struggle like the one Liang mentioned was a conflict that implicated the entire three dimensions, and a conflict of that scale was absolutely not as simple as the struggle between the immortal sects and devil sects that he thought of. As for true Xenorace, they are living beings that wandered the realms outside the three dimensions when the three dimensions were just born. These living beings are like the cosmos beasts you've seen, but they possess intelligence. Liang seemed to be unwilling to speak more about the Xenorace, and she just mentioned it before changing the topic and said, "Little junior brother, I'll be leaving at dawn tomorrow, whereas Liang Bing will personally send you back to the dark reverie. At that time, you just have to pass down the immeasurable virtue technique to her." Chun Shi was stunned. "Are these a condition of exchange?" Liang chuckled as she shook her head. "No. The talisman dimension was created at the front line of the battlefield of the three dimensions, and if it wants to continue existing, then it requires extremely formidable strength to preserve it. Liang Bing is undoubtedly the most suitable to do this, whereas so long as she grasps the immeasurable virtue technique, she would be able to utilize the might of the Grand Deduction Tower and carry out the most perfect control of the talisman dimension." Chun Shi came to a sudden understanding. He finally understood why Luo Zixuan and the others attached such importance to the immeasurable virtue technique. It turned out that it was related to the struggle to control the talisman dimension. Up until this point into the conversation, twilight had already arrived while dawn was arriving, and it just happened to be the moment before daybreak. Liang stood up while her clear eyes stared at Chun Shi, and then she said, "Little junior brother, since the moment you obtained the river diagram fragments, your fate was concealed by the workings of the heavens. Originally, I shouldn't interfere in these things related to you, but the three dimensions are about to undergo an upheaval, so I could only make this unwise decision and send you to the talisman dimension. In the future, you have to take care of yourself properly, and don't place your hopes on another, because only then would you be able to become a true expert." Chun Shi stood up right after her and nodded solemnly. "Don't worry, senior sister. When I just started cultivating all those years ago, Senior G, you had once warned me about this, and I've always remembered it in my heart. Martial Uncle Gu." Liang was stunned, and then she said with a smile, "That's for the best." As she spoke, she turned around to glance towards the depths of the courtyard and said indifferently, "Liang Bing, there's no time to lose. Take my little junior brother along with you, and I hope you remember what I've said." Xianxia turned around and saw Liang Bing had already teleported over with an icy cold expression as usual. But when she faced Liang, she couldn't refrain from revealed a wisp of reverence from between her brows. She didn't say anything and just nodded. Liang suddenly moved over to the side of Xianxia's ears, and she spoke with a sweet voice and fragrant breath while she chuckled. "Do you still remember what I told you when you just arrived at the talisman dimension? I'll give you anything you want if you're able to capture her." Swoosh! A wisp of silver and brilliant flowing light tore through the sky, and in the next instant, it charged into the boundless starry universe and vanished. Liang Bing controlled the silverlight shuttle while she scanned the star atlas in her hand, and she followed along a fixed pathway as she carried Xianxia towards the dark reverie. A star atlas was extremely precious because it indicated all the paths through the starry skies in the universe between the 3,000 worlds, so its value was extremely shocking, and it was even a priceless treasure. Because even in the immortal dimension, ordinary figures were unable to possess one, and even if they were able to possess one, it would usually indicate the paths that led to a few tens of worlds and was extremely incomplete. On the other hand, the star atlas Liang gave Liang Bing was a complete star atlas. Not only did it indicate the path to the 3,000 worlds, it even indicated the path to some strange and rare planes and mysterious areas. Those areas were places that people of the immortal dimension rarely stepped foot in. According to Liang Bing's estimation, merely the value of this star atlas in her possession was capable of causing countless immortals to go mad. After all, possessing such a star atlas meant that one possessed the path to countless areas that could be explored and innumerable wealth that could be unearthed. This carried matchless allure to any immortal or any great power. Of course, only existences at the heavenly immortal realm or above were capable of moving freely in the universe, and ordinary cultivators were utterly incapable of accomplishing this. Ali handed this over so easily to me? When she recalled Liang's indifferent appearance when Liang casually tossed the star atlas to her, Liang Bing couldn't help but be slightly dazed and felt disbelief in her heart. She was very sure that if she returned to the Liang clan in the immortal dimension, merely this star atlas was entirely capable of allowing her to easily obtain countless support. Even if it was those seniors that had always been unable to bear the sight of her, they would still shut their mouths obediently. In this way, she would have taken a large stride towards wielding the highest authority in her clan. When she thought up to here, Liang Bing couldn't help but sigh in her heart, and her thoughts were complicated as she glanced at Xianxia with a trace of envy and said in her heart, "I wonder how this fellow joined Oracle Mountain. This fortune is truly heaven-defying." Xianxia turned around and looked over as well when he noticed Liang Bing's gaze. Liang Bing's figure was ramrod straight and slender while her soft and wavy golden hair was coiled into a bun behind her head, revealing her angular and beautiful face to be revealed. Her forehead was clear and white, her nose was fine and high, and her red lips were plump and sexy, causing her beauty to be peerless and natural. Her dressing was as usual. She wore a tight and graceful top that caused her plumpness to be drawn out with alluring curves, and she even faintly revealed a wisp of dazzling snow white at her chest. On the other hand, she wore a short skirt that revealed a pair of thighs that were perfect and white like ivory, and it was extremely hot. Moreover, even the shoes she wore were sharp and shiny like an awl. All in all, no matter if it was face, figure, or clothes, this beautiful and icy cold woman before him was alluring and hot to the extreme. So even though Xianxia was familiar with her since a long time ago, he felt his breath taken away every time he looked at her. If someone is able to marry her, then merely keeping her at home as decoration would be rather pleasing to the eye. Xianxia sighed with emotion in his heart. Liang Bing was stared at by Xianxia to the point her entire body felt uncomfortable, and she thought in her heart, "Could it be that this fellow really has ill intentions towards me?" It was very normal for her to think like this because Liang had spoken extremely dubious and teasing words in front of her and Xianxia on more than one occasion, and it caused her to be unable to help but be slightly suspicious. She even thought about whether she should fiercely bash up Xianxia or choose to disregard Xianxia if Xianxia really had any thoughts towards her. If I disregard him, then would he think that I'm tacitly approving? Various strange thoughts surged into her mind, causing even Liang Bing herself to be shocked by herself. But her expression remained icy cold and calm, and she pretended to be composed as she turned around and said, "Do you need something?" "Oh no." She withdrew his gaze and said with a smile, "I'm just thinking whether accompanying me to the dark reverie would delay a lot of things in the talisman dimension. The Grand Deduction Tower is already repaired, so a major issue won't arise in a short period of time." Liang Bing replied while she became vigilant in her heart. Why would this fellow suddenly show concern towards me? She wasn't aware of the various thoughts in Liang Bing's mind, and he said while seeming to be lost in thought, "Haha, it's best if it's like that. The dark reverie is the large world that's the closest to the immortal dimension, and you've probably not gone there before. I can bring you along to see it after we've arrived." Liang Bing's heart jerked. He intends to use this to ask me out on a date? She couldn't help but feel a wave of embarrassment when she thought up to here, and then she raised her beautiful eyes to glance coldly at while she thought in her heart. We've only known each other for such a short period of time, yet he dares to casually ask me on a date. He's really audacious to the extreme for the sake of his lust. This was like the saying, a casual remark sounds significant to a suspicious listener. Once a thought takes root in one's heart, one's thoughts running wild after hearing some things people say couldn't be avoided. Obviously, Liang Bing's current state was one where her thoughts ran wild when it was related to Xianxia. Moreover, it showed the tendency of going to the limit. She couldn't help but feel that it was slightly odd when Liang Bing stared at him. Even though he was unable to guess the twists and turns that occurred in her heart, he was still able to faintly sense that Liang Bing seemed to be slightly unusual today. In next to no time, he tossed this thought to the back of his head and asked, "How long more will it take to arrive in the dark reverie?" Liang Bing's sexy red lips couldn't help but twitch imperceptibly when she heard this, and a wisp of powerlessness arose in her heart. He's even asking how long it will take? Could it be that this fellow is so anxious to go on a date with me? "A month," she replied irritably, and her usual composed and mighty bearing of a queen was gone. So slow? She was astounded. He remembered that when his senior sister Liang brought him to the talisman dimension, the amount of time she expended was only 2 days. He's even complaining about it being slow? Is this fellow already anxious to the point of going crazy? Liang Bing's eyelids twitched, and she was on the verge of going berserk. She truly wished for nothing more than to raise her sharp show and fiercely trample on this bastard to help her calm down the anger in her heart. She took a deep breath and forcefully restrained the embarrassment and rage in her heart before she said emotionlessly, "This is already the limit of the Silverlight shuttle." She glanced at Liang Bing with surprise, and he said with concern, "Your expression is slightly abnormal. Are you not well?" "Not well? Why wouldn't I be well? He's even pretending to be concerned about me. He's truly detestable." Liang Bing was really disgusted, and she restrained herself repeatedly for a long time before she said helplessly, "It's fine so long as I agree to accompany you to see the dark reverie, right?" She was stunned, and then he shook his head and said, "It's only to go around and experience it. If you're not interested, it wouldn't be late to talk about it later." This time, Liang Bing was completely speechless, and she couldn't help but desire to shout in her heart, "My God, is there really such a person in the world? He's trying to put on an act after benefiting? Could it be that I have to kneel down and beg him to go on a date with me?" At this moment, she even had the heart to kill. After all, as a mysterious immortal realm expert and the inheritor of the Liang clan in the talisman dimension, she'd utilized an imposing and might appearance to deal with everything all along her way until now, and she'd never wronged herself as she'd done today. She acutely noticed that Liang Bing's mood seemed to be extremely horrible, and he extremely sensibly chose to keep quiet. In next to no time, he stopped thinking and started comprehending the immeasurable virtue technique, and his expression was concentrated while he seemed to be happy and content with himself. Heart Chi, Heart Core, Heart Soul, and Heart Infant. These were the 4 great realms of heart energy. According to Li Yang's guidance, so long as his heart energy obtained the heart-soul realm, It would be sufficient to deal with the detection of the heaven Tao and allow him to charge into the earthly immortal realm without worrying about being taken as a variant and suffering the annihilation of the divine lightning of judgment. When he left the 10th level of the Grand Deduction Tower, Xianxia had noticed that his virtue energy had already attained a terrifying number of 1.36 million stars, whereas his heart-core cultivation had undergone a shocking change. It seemed as if a life was being developed, strengthening, and growing within the heart core, and it emanated exuberant vitality that surged to the extreme, causing a rhythm that sounded like the drumming of fiend gods. Most shocking of it all was that a faint figure had appeared above the heart core that was like a cocoon, and it was ethereal, illusory, and faintly visible. She could only discern that it was a small person based on its outline, and it was sitting cross-legged with its eyes closed in meditation above the heart core. She knew that it was the soul of his heart. When the heart-soul's figure was condensed to a material form, his heart energy would advance from the heart-core realm to the heart-soul realm. But this process was impossible to accomplish solely by accumulating virtue energy, and it required the assistance of a cultivation technique. Otherwise, with the virtue energy she had accumulated, he would have advanced to the heart-soul realm a long time ago. Simply speaking, the virtue energy was like water, whereas heart energy was like a pool. The volume of the pool was fixed, so too much water would only cause it to overflow, and the water would be utterly unable to be of use. On the other hand, the method of cultivating heart energy was methods of expanding and deepening the pool. Only in this way would it be able to accumulate even more water and bring forth a greater effect. But cultivation techniques related to heart energy were extremely rare in the 3 dimensions, and it was practically impossible to find in the mortal dimension. Even if it was in the immortal dimension, such a cultivation technique was a rare and precious treasure that could only be chanced upon by luck. This caused someone that was able to attain the heart-soul realm in the mortal dimension to be 1 in a billion. On the other hand, the immeasurable virtue technique she obtained from the 10th level of the Grand Deduction Tower was a cultivation technique like this. It utilized virtue as its foundation to cultivate heart energy, and its value was so great that it was capable of causing the gods in the 3 dimensions to covet it. When she saw she keep silent and fall into deep contemplation, the nearby Liang Bing couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. She was truly worried that she wouldn't stop and put forward some other presumptuous requests. 1 month later, a ray of light that was bright silver like chilly starlight suddenly tore through the sky and entered the dark reverie. The familiar aura of the heaven Tao, familiar mountains, rivers, scenery, and spirit energy of the heaven and the earth. After being separated for over a year, he'd finally returned at this moment, causing she to be unable to help but feel as if generations had passed. "I've finally returned." He couldn't help but sigh with emotion. Instantly, he thought of too many things. He thought of the 9 Radiant Sword Sect, Ling Bai, Bai Kue, Mu Kue, his seniors, the clansmen of the 9th Hell Tribe. Of course, there was also Qing Shui and Bing Shirtian. This is the dark reverie? Liang Bing's clear eyes swept through the heavens and the earth, and she couldn't help but exclaim with admiration. As expected of a vast large world that's the closest to the immortal dimension. There are so many ancient restrictions, and I sense the aura of numerous experts that are living in seclusion. How strong are they? She restrained his thoughts and asked. "I'm unable to be sure, and I'll only know if we have a fight," replied Liang Bing. She was a mysterious immortal and had cultivated immortal sense since a long time ago. A casual sweep of it was capable inspecting an entire small world. But only when she arrived at the dark reverie did she realize that there were actually places that her immortal sense was unable to inspect. In other words, the dark reverie was too vast, and there were too many ancient restrictions within it, causing her to not dare inspect in a manner that was too unbridled. She said hastily, "Let's go. Follow me back to my sect first. Now isn't the time to fight." Liang Bing couldn't help but roll her eyes at him. "Am I that sort of person that causes trouble deliberately?" "Of course not." She replied seriously, and then he laughed bitterly. "I'm just worried that someone else offends you." "Why?" Liang Bing's brows raised. "Because you're too beautiful." She shrugged. Liang Bing was stunned while a trace of rage was gradually condensing in her clear eyes. She finally realized that the more she let him off, the more presumptuous this little bastard go. Now, he actually dared to tease her to her face. Don't misunderstand. I'm speaking the truth. Xianxia noticed that the situation wasn't good, and he explained right away. Even you know very well that being too beautiful is sometimes a type of sin, and it's easy to cause some people with weak wills to make mistake. Liang Bing glared angrily at Xianxia, yet she was rather troubled in her heart. She was very curious why she kept having a powerless feeling before this little bastard, and she couldn't beat nor scold him. It was truly a headache to her. With Liang Bing by his side, less than a few breaths of time passed before the mountain range the 9 Radiant Sword sect resided on was revealed before Xianxia's eyes. But the scene before his eyes caused him to be greatly shocked. The mountain range before him had changed completely in appearance, and the myriad of mountains were enveloped by a light barrier of restrictions that was in the shape of an eggshell. Xianxia was even able to sense that the spirit energy, baleful qi, immortal energy, and various types of powerful airflows were ceaselessly fusing into the light barrier. There were many disciples whistling about in the air within the mountain range of the 9 Radiant Sword sect. Some were refining pills, some were refining swords, and some were fighting and tempering each other. The entire sect had a tense and busy aura, and it was completely different from the leisurely, peaceful, and carefree atmosphere from before. It was simply as if it had changed completely. A very formidable, immortal formation. Liang Bing gazed at it for a while before she said, "This is the sect you joined? Even though it's formidable, it's far too inferior to the Oracle Mountain. This is the mortal dimension, not the immortal dimension." Xianxia corrected. "Oh, I forgot that you're only at the nether transformation realm, and joining such a sect is indeed something to take pride in." Even though Liang Bing expressed her understanding, her expression was still icy cold, and she didn't reveal the slightest respect when speaking about the 9 Radiant Sword sect. This was the arrogance of a mysterious immortal realm expert. In the talisman dimension, her status was like that of an overlord that controlled the world, so she naturally wouldn't pay too much attention to the 9 Radiant Sword sect. Xianxia naturally understood this and didn't argue with Liang Bing about it, and he flew towards the entrance of the 9 Radiant Sword sect. "Who are you? Quickly report your name." Xianxia didn't conceal his figure. After all, he was an elder of the 9 Radiant Sword sect and had authority over the West Radiance Peak, so his status was lofty. But, right when he approached the 9 Radiant Sword sect's entrance, a few disciples flew out abruptly from within the light barrier. One of them shouted at Xianxia, "My 9 Radiant Sword sect has to make arrangements for a major event in this month. So we've closed our doors to all invaders and guests. Fellow Taoist, please leave swiftly." Liang Bing glanced at Xianxia with a strange expression when she heard this. On the way here, she'd heard Xianxia say that he was an elder of the 9 Radiant Sword sect and possessed a lofty status. So why would a disciple that guarded the entrance of the sect not recognize him? Xianxia was stunned as well, and then his gaze swept the surroundings slightly. He noticed that the cultivation of these disciples was roughly at the Golden Core realm, and their cultivations could be considered to be not bad. But their faces were extremely unfamiliar, and they seemed to have joined the sect recently. But he didn't find this to be strange because the 9 Radiant Sword sect had surely started making a move as the upheaval of the 3 dimensions was arriving, and the sect had started to expand its forces. "I'm Xianxia. This is my command token." Xianxia flicked with his finger, causing a command token to transform into a flowing ray of light that flew over. "What? Your elder Xianxia?" As soon as those disciples heard this and sized up the command token in their hands, all of them were shocked, but their faces revealed vigilant expressions instead. Xianxia frowned and was slightly bewildered when he saw their reaction. After all, he could be considered to be known far and wide now, and the entire Dark Reverie knew of him. Especially amongst the younger generation of the 9 Radiant Sword sect. His reputation was like a scorching sun in the midday sky. But when these disciples saw him now, not only did they not greet him respectfully, they even revealed a wisp of vigilance. Could it be that something has occurred in the sect? Instantly, numerous thoughts flashed in Xianxia's mind, and his expression even became slightly gloomy because there was surely something strange going on when what happened was different than usual. He'd returned excitedly but had the door shut at his face, and it was even to the extent that they still dared to be so vigilant against him after finding out his identity. This was too unusual. Let's go, it's just some ignorant disciples. I didn't expect to let you watch me make a fool of myself. She turned around and glanced at Liang Bing before flashing towards the sect. He wanted to see who dared obstruct him. Liang Bing naturally had no objections, and she followed closely behind him. One of them was a heaven-defying existence at the perfection stage of the nether transformation realm, whereas the other was even more terrifying, and she was a mysterious immortal realm expert that was supreme and even more formidable than a heavenly immortal. At the instant they moved out, merely their imposing aura terrified those disciples that guarded the entrance to the point their expressions went pale, and they swiftly hid into the light barrier that blotted out the sky. Shit! An enemy assault! An enemy assault! After those disciples entered into the defensive grand formation, they cried out repeatedly with the intention to alert everyone, and they seemed as if they were facing a great enemy. An enemy assault? She was even more furious when he heard these words. At the same time, he was even surer that a shocking unexpected even had definitely occurred in the 9 Radiant Sword sect during this period of time that he left the sect. Bang! He stretched out his hand and grabbed, causing a ball of terrifying tempest to converge in his palm, and it transformed into an enormous hand that was formed from tempests before it directly grabbed onto the light barrier that sealed up the 9 Radiant Sword sect. Instantly, the light barrier started shaking violently and emitted rumbling that sounded like a myriad of thunderclaps, and its impetus was shocking to the extreme. With Xianxia's current combat strength, the strike of his was sufficient to shatter 1,000 mountains, incinerate countless pools of water, and annihilating ordinary earthly immortal realm experts was as easy as flipping his hand. But when facing the defensive grand formation of the 9 Radiant Sword sect, it was slightly insufficient, and his strength was instantly dispersed. If I'm not wrong, this is an ancient immortal formation. It's connected to the heavens and the earth and contained the 5 elements, and it relies on the energy of the universe and space to maintain its circulation. If ordinary heavenly immortals were to come here, they would be trapped within it as well. Liang Bing said from the side, "Do you want me to make a move and break through it?" Xianxia's brows knit together even more tightly, and he shook his head to indicate there was no need. At the same time, a vertical eye opened up between his brows, and he'd started examining it with the eye of divine truth combined with his attainments in the Tao of Talismans since a long time. After a short moment, his eyes light up as he said, "Follow behind me. Let's go in first." Liang Bing was stunned. How long has passed? Yet he has already seen through the profundities of this ancient immortal formation? Audacious! Thief! How dare you trespass forcefully into the sect? You're simply courting death. That isn't a thief, that's Elder Xianxia. I know! Right at this moment, another group of disciples surged into appearance behind the grand formation, and they berated Xianxia without end from behind the light barrier. Swoosh! In the next moment, they felt something flash before their eyes, and then 2 figures had appeared in front of them. It shocked those disciples to the point their entire bodies shivered. Never had they imagined that the strongest sect guarding grand formation in their sect would actually be traversed so easily. Quickly report it to the elders. A disciple was the first to react, and he cried out with a sharp voice, "Bang!" But his voice had just started to resound out when it stopped abruptly. His entire body seemed as if it was fiercely suppressed by an enormous mountain, and he knelt on the ground with a thump. He was like a toad that lay on the ground, and he was unable to stand up no matter how he struggled. Going against your superior and defying your senior. Tell me, what great event is the sect making arrangements for? Why do you still take me to be a thief after knowing my identity? Xianxia's expression was rather unsightly, and cold lightly surged with his eyes as they opened and closed. Every single disciple that his gaze swept by felt their entire bodies go cold while breathing felt difficult, and they felt as if they'd fallen into an icy pit. Everyone looked at each other, yet none of them answered him. Xianxia was even more furious when he saw this, and he suddenly grunted coldly. It was like an explosive thunderclap that resounded by the ears of everyone, and it shook them to the point their souls almost collapsed and left their bodies. Their legs shivered, and then they emitted a wave of thumps as they fell down to a kneeling position on the ground. Don't blame me for punishing all of you according to the penalties of the sect if you still don't answer me. Xianxia spoke with an icy cold voice. Finally, a disciple that was drenched in cold sweat spoke with a stutter. Elder Xianxia, we didn't do it willingly. This is the order of the sect, and we don't know the reason behind it. Xianxia's brows raised while his gaze swept past the others. With his formidable soul, he was able to instantly determine that the disciple from before wasn't lying. But the more it was like this, the more discontent and indignant he was. They actually took me to be a thief without any reason? The most worrying thing to him was whether Ling Bai and the others on West Radiance Peak were implicated by him and had been affected. When he thought up to here, he was unable to restrain the rage in his heart any longer, and his figure flashed towards West Radiance Peak. Last time, Ling Bai and Mu Kuei had suffered the oppression of Wuxia because he wasn't present, and they were forced to flee the sect and had almost been murdered. On the other hand, Huomoliai and the others were even captured to the Heavenflow Dao sect, and they suffered boundless torment and almost lost their lives. This time, he'd only left for a single year, yet even he had actually been taken to be an enemy. How could Xianxia continue to be composed and calm before such an unexpected event? But right at the instant he made a move, a streak flew over from the distant sky, and the person hadn't arrived when a voice had sounded out from afar. Xianxia, calm down for a moment. The matter isn't as you've imagined. As she spoke, she'd already arrived. She wore a fiery red dress, and she possessed a gorgeous appearance. Shockingly, it was Wei's younger sister, and Ku. They've already taken me to be an enemy. So is there any need to imagine anything about all this? Xianxia frowned while his voice carried rage that couldn't be suppressed. He's only acted like this because it was Ku, and if it was any other person, he couldn't be bothered to pay any attention to the person and would have charged off directly. Ku's heart jerked when she heard Xianxia's question, and she knew that she was still a step too late because the seeds of misunderstanding had already been planted into Xianxia's heart, causing it to be impossible to resolve in just a few words, especially since she felt that the sect had gone too far in this matter this time. Thoughts bloomed in Ku's mind, yet she swiftly explained. Xianxia, these disciples that are guarding the entrance have only just entered the sect not too long ago, so they aren't aware of the internal matters of the sect. Actually, it's a misunderstanding. Xianxia's expression remained gloomy as he said, A misunderstanding? I've even handed over my command token. Could it be that it's insufficient to prove my identity? Moreover, they've clearly recognized me, yet still took me to be an enemy. Can this be called a misunderstanding? Ku was questioned to the point her face froze, and she was slightly at a loss for words. Xianxia couldn't bear putting her in a difficult situation when he saw this because all those years ago when he'd just entered the sect, Ku had helped him on numerous occasions, so even if he had a belly full of rage, he would absolutely not vent it on her. So he paused for a moment and then he sighed. Ku, tell me frankly, exactly what is going on? Ku bit her lips, yet she didn't know from where to begin, causing her expression to be indeterminate, and she said after quite a long pause, Xianxia, why don't you come with me to see the sect master, and you'll understand everything once you ask him. I really don't know how to explain it to you. When he saw her struggling and being indeterminate like this, Xianxia's heart sank, and he had a deeper feeling that it wasn't anything good, so he shook his head and said, I'll naturally go pay a visit to the sect master later, but I'm returning to the West Radiance Peak first. As soon as he finished speaking, Ku seemed to have thought of something, and words escaped her mouth. No! After that, when she saw Xianxia's expression had suddenly turned cold, she cried out in her heart. Shit! She swiftly said, Xianxia, take it as me begging you, go pay a visit to the sect master first. I swear that the West Radiance Peak is completely unharmed, and it didn't suffer any damage during the period that you weren't present in the sect. But the more she acted in this way, the more unsightly Xianxia's expression was, And he was even able to guess that even if the West Radiance Peak didn't suffer any damage, it had probably undergone some sort of huge unexpected event. And Ku, for the sake of our relationship, please move aside. Xianxia had a murderous expression while his voice revealed an indisputable tone. As he spoke, he'd already leaped out with a large stride, and he avoided Ku before charging towards the West Radiance Peak. Xianxia, there's no one left on the West Radiance Peak. And Ku couldn't help but shout out from behind him. Xianxia stopped abruptly while his expressions instantly became icy cold to the extreme. People that knew him well knew that his expression would seem extremely calm and indifferent when he was furious to the limit. At this moment, even an outside like Liang Bing had discerned something was unusual, and she couldn't help but frown. Young miss, if you have something to say, then speak frankly. Hesitating to speak will only cause you to be misunderstood. Could it be that you think there are some things that she can't deal with? Her voice carried a trace of immortal profundity because every single move an expert at the mysterious immortal realm made carried the profundity of causing technique to appear alone with their words. So when these words entered into Nku's ears, they were like a resounding bell that carried an enlightening feeling, and it instantly caused her to recover from her panic and become much calmer. But she had already vanished when she wanted to speak again. Liang Bing shook her head when she saw this, and then her figure flashed and transformed into a flowing ray of light as she vanished while carrying Nku along with her. Only those disciples that guarded the entrance were left kneeling on the ground, and they glanced at each other with gazes that carried shock and extreme fear. West Radiance Peak. Just like Nku had said, every single blade of grass, piece of wood, mountain, or rock in the area of the West Radiance Peak was just as before, and it didn't suffer any damage. Moreover, there were numerous precious beasts patrolling and lurking within it. However, besides this, the entire West Radiance Peak was silent. Not only were Huaremole and the others not there, even Ling Bai, Mu Kue, Bai Kue, Axiu, Shuyen, and the clansmen of the Ninth Hell Tribe weren't on the West Radiance Peak. In this way, it seemed to be even stranger. After all, the current West Radiance Peak couldn't be compared to before now. It was a place that everyone in the Nine Radiant Sword sect clearly knew couldn't be offended, and it was even to the extent that the West Radiance Peak was rather renowned in the entire Dark Reverie. Yet now, in his own territory, his friends and seniors had all vanished. How could Xianxia accept this? At the instant he laid eyes on this scene, he felt the flames of rage in his heart being on the verge of erupting like a volcano, and every single inch of pores in his body started to tremble. What's going on? Where are all of them? Xianxia recalled the attitude of taking him as an enemy that those disciples had when he just entered the sect, and he recalled Nku's hesitant expression. So, how could his heart possibly calm down? Xianxia, even though they aren't in the sect now, there is no danger to their lives. Meanwhile, Nku had rushed over while being carried by Liang Bing, and she spoke with both anxiety and worry when she saw Xianxia's eyes to clearly revealed monstrous flames of rage. You must control your rage. You must not be impulsive. Xianxia turned around. Jiai's voice seemed as if it whistled out from the depths of an icy pit, and it was icy cold like a blade as he asked, "Tell me, who exactly did this?" Nku was stunned, and she didn't know how to tell him. Xianxia, come with me. The sect will give you an explanation. Meanwhile, a tall and mighty figure suddenly flashed over from the distance, and it carried a dignified and firm bearing. It was exactly Elder Lai Peng. Xianxia raised his eyes and stared at Lai Peng for a long time before he nodded and said, "All right." Lai Peng controlled the matters of punishment in the sect and had always treated him well. It could be said that besides Madman Lu, it was Lai Peng, the sect master, and the old man that lived in seclusion and stood on guard before the book reserve that treated him the best in the Nine Radiant Sword sect. So she was unable to refuse his request. This is. Lai Peng's expression instantly eased up greatly when he saw Xianxia reply, and he heaved a sigh of relief in his heart before he glanced to the side. His eyes couldn't help but focus when he saw Liang Bing. He smelt a trace of an extremely formidable aura from this woman with a beautiful and icy cold appearance, and it caused him to feel indescribable pressure in his heart. "A friend," Xianxia answered, When he saw Chen, she was unwilling to explain further. Lai Peng couldn't be bothered to care too much about it, because the important matter at hand was to calm down the flames of rage in Xianxia's heart, and everything else could be placed aside. On the other hand, when Liang Bing heard the world friend, a wisp of a glow silently slid past the depths of her eyes, because this fellow had finally spoken a word that felt comfortable to her. Even though it was only a single word, true martial peak, the hall at the core of the 9 Radiant Sword sect. When Xianxia arrived at the hall, he saw that only the sect master Wen Huiding was within the entire hall, and it seemed to be extremely empty. This caused his heart that was in his throat to finally calm down slightly. He was indeed worried that because of some sort of unexpected event, the sect master and Lai Peng had set up a trap and would suddenly make a move against him. This was something that he was absolutely unable to accept, because in his heart they were both seniors that were extremely respected by him, and they were extremely nice to him. If such a match really occurred, then he would surely be unable to endure the blow it struck on him. Fortunately, only the sect master was within the hall, and this proved that the matter was far from being terrible to a state that couldn't be any more horrible. When Huiding didn't engage in too much small talk when he saw Xianxia, and he spoke frankly. Last month, people came to the 9 Radiant Sword sect from the Immortal dimension, and the descendant of a great figure saw Shuyan and wanted to take her as a slave concubine. You know as well, Shuyan is a pure-blooded 9-tailed fox that's innately charming and rare. Thus, her race is very popular amongst the great figures of the Immortal dimension. According to what he said, it was precisely for the sake of protecting Shuyan from being forcefully seized that he, as the sect master of the 9 Radiant Sword sect, still had no choice but to temporarily place everyone from the West Radiance Peak outside the sect so as to avoid the displeasure of those people from the Immortal dimension. At the same time, doing this was for the sake of calming the flames of rage of those people from the Immortal dimension. But when Huiding had never expected that that person would somehow find out that Shuyan belonged to Xianxia, so he hated Xianxia as well. Due to Xianxia being away from the sect, that figure from the Immortal dimension could only forcefully order the entire 9 Radiant Sword sect to take Xianxia as an enemy, and he was waiting for Xianxia to return before making Xianxia suffer. Sounded very laughable and even absurd. But Xianxia knew that this was the style of the descendants of great figures from the Immortal dimension. They were arrogant, overbearing, and considered everyone in the world to be beneath them. Once they descended to the mortal dimension, they were even fearless and lawless. So transferring his rage onto Xianxia because he was unable to obtain Shuiyang seemed to be very normal. At this point, Xianxia finally understood everything, and when he thought of how all of this was caused by a descendant of a great figure from the Immortal dimension, he truly wished for nothing more than to kill that bastard right now. If it was before, he would surely be extremely fearful when he heard the words Immortal dimension, and he might even have no choice but to endure this. But it was different now. Not only had he seen these so-called young masters and young misses from the Immortal dimension in the Talisman dimension, he'd even killed many of them, so how could he possibly care now? Alas, Xianxia, you don't know that for the sake of protecting everyone on your West Radiance Peak, the sect master has endured countless humiliation. So you should show understanding for the difficulty of the sect, because this is already the best outcome that the sect master was capable of striving for you. Lai Peng frowned as he sighed. His ferocious face carried a strand of rage and grievance as well, and he seemed to have no place to vent and could only forcefully endure it in his heart. Xianxia took a deep breath and worked hard to restrain the seething killing intent in his heart as he asked, "Sect Master, Martial Uncle Lai Peng, why are the people that have come from the Immortal dimension running wild like this? Could it be that the seniors in the sect don't care?" He was speaking about those seniors that lived in seclusion within Divine Radiance Peak because there was no lack of terrifying existences there. The reason is very simple. These people are from the forces of the 9 Radiant Sword sect in the Immortal dimension, and this power was formed by the great figures from our 9 Radiant Sword sect that ascended into the Immortal dimension during the countless years of the past. Even though only a mere few great figures descended to the mortal dimension this time, but not to mention me and the sect master, even those seniors with extremely high seniority in the sect had to be respectful. Lai Peng let out a long sigh while his voice carried a trace of deep helplessness. Obviously, He was rather displeased by the actions of these people from the immortal dimension. Xianxia's brows knit together even more tightly. It's really troublesome if it's like this. This caused him to be extremely aggrieved. Could it be that we're just going to swallow the insult and humiliation? Bang! Right at this moment, the entrance to the hall was suddenly blasted open from the outside, and then loud laughter sounded out. Ha ha ha! This young master heard that kid Chen she has returned? Where is he? Quickly make him come pay this young master a visit.